The dust hadn't even settled when the first shot rang out. Marshal Cole Maddox stood in the middle of Main Street, his hand hovering over his Colt, staring down 15 armed men who'd just ridden into Abilene like they owned it. Behind him, terrified families huddled in doorways. Ahead, Victor Hale sat tall in his saddle, a cruel smile cutting across his weathered face. "This town's got two choices, Marshal," Hale's voice carried like thunder. "Bow down or burn down." Cole's fingers twitched. One wrong move, one bullet. That's all it would take to start a war that would paint these streets red. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The sun hung like a copper coin in the Kansas sky, bleeding amber light across the endless prairie. Abilene sprawled beneath it, part dream, part nightmare, all chaos. The railroad had arrived 3 years prior, and with it came the cattle drives that transformed a sleepy collection of buildings into the wildest town in the West. Marshal Cole Maddox had seen it all before. Different town, same fever. He stood on the wooden boardwalk outside the marshal's office, one boot propped against a support post, watching the daily theater unfold. Cowboys from the latest trail drive whooped and hollered as they poured into the saloons. Merchants scrambled to accommodate them, dollar signs dancing in their eyes. And somewhere beyond the town limits, homesteaders plowed their modest claims, building futures one furrow at a time. 3 worlds, one powder keg. Cole was 42, though the lines around his eyes added a decade. His face was sun-darkened leather stretched over sharp bones, and his gray eyes held the kind of stillness that came from seeing too much death. The tin star on his vest caught the light, 6 points of tarnished authority in a place that respected only 2 things, money and violence. "Another herd coming in tomorrow," his deputy Ben Ridley said from the doorway. Ben was 25, eager, and still believed the badge meant something. "That'll be 4 herds in 2 weeks. Town's bursting at the seams." "Town's always bursting," Cole replied without looking back. "Question is what it spills when it finally breaks." He'd been in Abilene for 8 months, brought in by the town council after the previous marshal got himself killed trying to break up a fight between a cattle baron's son and a settler over water rights. That marshal had made the mistake of thinking justice mattered more than power. Cole knew better. Justice was a luxury. In places like this, survival was the only currency that counted. "Marshal!" A boy of maybe 12 came running up the street, his face flushed with exertion. "Mr. Garrett says you better come quick. There's trouble at the land office." Cole sighed and pushed off the post. "What kind of trouble?" "The shooting kind, sir." Of course it was. The land office sat on the corner of Cedar and 3rd, a narrow building wedged between a dry goods store and a boarding house. A crowd had gathered outside, that particular kind of crowd that forms when people smell blood but don't want to get any on themselves. Cole shouldered through them, Ben trailing behind. Inside, the situation was exactly what he'd expected. 3 cowboys stood on one side of the room, hands near their guns. On the other side, 2 homesteaders, farmers by the dirt under their nails and the desperation in their eyes, stood their ground. Between them, the land office clerk, a nervous man named Abernathy, clutched a sheaf of papers like they were holy scripture. "Gentlemen," Cole said, his voice cutting through the tension, "somebody want to explain this before I start arresting everybody?" One of the cowboys, a tall man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, spoke first. "No trouble, Marshal. Just making sure Mr. Abernathy here understands the situation." "What situation would that be?" "That land these nesters are trying to claim?" The cowboy jerked his thumb at the homesteaders. "That's part of the Hale Ranch grazing territory. Has been for 10 years. One of the farmers, a broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair, stepped forward. "That's a lie, and you know it. We filed proper claims through the Homestead Act. Federal law says this land is ours if we work it for 5 years." "Federal law," the scarred cowboy spat. "You think some paper from Washington means anything out here?" Cole moved between them, slow and deliberate. "It does when I say it does." "Abernathy, these claims properly filed?" The clerk nodded vigorously. Yes, Marshal. Everything's legal. The Morgenstern family and the Vorn family both have valid homestead claims. The land was open range, not deeded property." "There you have it," Cole said. "The land's theirs." The scarred cowboy's hand drifted toward his gun. Mr. Hale ain't gonna like this. Cole's eyes went flat and cold. Your hand moves another inch, and you'll be too dead to tell Mr. Hale anything. Now, I suggest you three get back to whatever you were doing before you decided to terrorize a land clerk. For a long moment, the cowboy held his gaze. Cole had been in enough of these stare-downs to know how they ended. The man would either draw or back down. There was no in-between. Let's go, Cade, one of the other cowboys muttered. This ain't worth it. Cade, the scarred cowboy, smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Another time, Marshal. They filed out, spurs jingling against the wooden floor. Cole waited until they were gone before turning to the homesteaders. You two new to the area? The gray-haired farmer extended his hand. Elias Vorn, Marshal. This is Samuel Morgenstern. We arrived 3 weeks ago, along with about 20 other families. We've got claims spread along the North Creek. Cole shook their hands, but kept his expression neutral. That's Hale territory you're moving into. It's federal land, Morgenstern said. He was younger than Vorn, maybe 30, with the kind of intensity that came from believing in something beyond himself. The law? I know what the law says, Cole interrupted. But out here, the law and reality don't always shake hands. Victor Hale's been running cattle through this country since before most of these buildings existed. He's not going to just step aside because some government official in Washington signed a paper. Are you saying we should give up our legal claims? Vorn's voice was steady, but Cole could hear the steel beneath it. I'm saying you should be ready for trouble. Cole glanced at Ben, then back at the homesteaders. How many families did you say? 23, with more coming. We've got women, children. We're building a community, Marshal. Schools, churches, real civilization. That's the future. Cattle drives and wide-open range. That's the past. Cole had heard this speech before, in other towns, from other dreamers. Sometimes they were right. Sometimes they were just early corpses. You armed? Morgenstern bristled. We're farmers, not gunfighters. Then you better learn to be both or hire men who are. Because when Hale finds out you're stringing fences across his cattle trails, words won't settle the argument. He left them there, processing the hard truth of their situation. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent, painting Abilene in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful, if you ignored the undercurrent of violence that ran through every street like a hidden river. You think they'll listen? Ben asked as they walked back toward the office. No, Cole said. Believers never do. They think their righteousness will protect them. And will it? Cole looked at his deputy, at that young face still untouched by cynicism. Righteousness doesn't stop bullets, Ben. Only bullets stop bullets. Okay. The Longhorn Saloon was the crown jewel of Abilene's Vice District. If anything built from raw timber and soaked in whiskey could be called a jewel. 3 stories of sin and profit, owned by a man named Dutch Kearney, who understood that morality was bad for business. Cole pushed through the batwing doors just after sunset. The place was already packed with trail-weary cowboys spending 3 months' wages in 3 days. Piano music fought with shouting voices, and the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sweat of men who'd forgotten what a bath was. Dutch stood behind the bar, a mountain of a man with a bald head and arms like tree trunks. He nodded at Cole, then jerked his chin toward the back room. The town council was waiting. 6 men sat around a table meant for poker. Dutch Kearney, James Weatherby, the banker, Harold Grissom, who owned the general store, Theodore Alcott, the railroad agent, Dr. Martin Hendricks, and Mayor Josiah Webb. Together they controlled Abilene's economy, and by extension, its future. Marshal, Webb said, gesturing to an empty chair. Thank you for coming. Cole remained standing. This about the incident at the land office? Among other things? Webb was a portly man with magnificent whiskers and the smooth voice of someone who'd never done a day's hard labor. We've been hearing disturbing reports. More homesteaders arriving daily, filing claims on land the ranchers consider theirs. Federal land, Cole corrected, open to homesteading under the law. Weatherby, the banker, leaned forward. Legal technicalities aside, Marshal, we have a practical concern. The cattle drives are the lifeblood of this town. The cowboys spend money here. The ranchers bank with us, ship through our railroad. If we alienate them, you mean if I enforce the law? If you choose sides, Dutch rumbled, you'll force everyone else to do the same, and that's bad for business. Cole let his gaze sweep across each face. What exactly are you asking me to do? Webb cleared his throat. Simply maintain balance, Marshal. Don't go out of your way to antagonize the cattle interests. The homesteaders will either adapt or leave. Let nature take its course. Nature? Cole tasted the word. That what you call it when Hale's men run settlers off their legal claims? We're not asking you to ignore your duties, Dr. Hendricks said. He was the only one who met Cole's eyes directly. Just to exercise discretion, find the middle ground. There is no middle ground, Cole said. Either the law means something or it doesn't. Either those homesteaders have a right to their claims or they don't. Which is it? Silence filled the room like smoke. Finally, Webb spoke. We're simply asking you to be pragmatic, Marshal. We brought you here to keep the peace, not to start a war. Cole smiled without humor. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, gentlemen. Sometimes it's just the pause before the storm. He turned toward the door, then stopped. And for the record, I didn't start anything. The war was already here. I'm just the poor bastard trying to keep it from burning down your town. He left them there, their worried faces reflected in the amber glow of oil lamps. Outside, night had claimed Abilene. Music spilled from the saloons, punctuated by laughter and the occasional crash of breaking glass. Cowboys moved from establishment to establishment like bees drunk on honey. Money changed hands, promises were made and broken. The machinery of frontier commerce ground on. Cole walked the streets, his presence a thin line of order in the chaos. He broke up 2 fights, hauled one unconscious drunk to the jail cell, and prevented a card game from turning into a shooting by the simple expedient of standing between the angry players until they remembered why killing someone over a pair of queens was a poor investment. It was nearly midnight when he finally returned to the marshal's office. Ben had gone home hours ago, leaving a lamp burning low in the window. Cole poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove, thick as mud and twice as bitter, just how he liked it, and settled into the chair behind his desk. The paperwork could wait. He was too tired to care about reports and requisitions. He thought about Webb's words. Keep the peace. As if peace were something you could keep, like a pet or a possession. In Cole's experience, peace was the rarest thing in the West, more valuable than gold and twice as fleeting. You didn't keep it. You fought for it, bled for it, and watched it slip away the moment you stopped paying attention. And Abilene? Abilene was running out of peace fast. The sound of hoofbeats pulled him from his thoughts. Too many riders, moving too fast, too late at night. Cole set down his coffee and checked his gun. The Colt Peacemaker was clean, loaded, ready. He'd killed 11 men with this weapon over the years, all of them in situations where death was the only answer left on the table. He hoped tonight wouldn't make it 12. The riders pulled up outside the marshal's office in a cloud of dust. Cole stepped onto the boardwalk, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. There were 15 of them, all armed, all looking like they'd been riding hard. And at the front, mounted on a black stallion that must have cost more than most men earned in a year, sat Victor Hale. Cole had never met the man, but he knew him instantly. Power radiated from Hale like heat from a forge. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and lean, with the kind of face that was used to giving orders and never hearing the word no. His clothes were expensive, tailored suit, fine boots, a silver-worked gun belt, but he wore them like working gear, not costume. Marshal Maddox, Hale's voice was cultured, almost gentle. The voice of a man who didn't need to shout because everyone always listened. I apologize for the late hour. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Kind of a large conversation, Cole observed, nodding at the armed men. Hale smiled. Can't be too careful these days. There's been talk of trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that happens when people forget how things work. Hale dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd been born in a saddle. May I come inside? Cole considered refusing, then decided that would only delay the inevitable. Your men stay out here. Of course. Inside the office, Hale took a moment to look around, his gaze cataloging everything. The gun rack, the cells in the back, the wanted posters on the wall, the coffee pot still steaming on the stove. Coffee? Cole offered. No thank you, I won't take much of your time. Hale settled into the chair across from Cole's desk like he owned it. I understand there was an incident at the land office today. Your men threatened some homesteaders. I sent them on their way, not much of an incident. My men were protecting my interests. Your interests don't include terrorizing citizens filing legal land claims. Hale's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Marshal, I've been running cattle through this country for 12 years. I've built an empire on these plains, employing hundreds of men, shipping thousands of head to market every year. I feed this town. I built this town. And now, because of some government program designed by bureaucrats who've never set foot west of the Mississippi, I'm supposed to stand aside and let squatters carve up my grazing land. It's not your land, Cole said simply. It's federal land, open range. The Homestead Act is a fantasy. Hale stood, leaning forward on the desk. You seem like a practical man, Marshal, so let me be practical with you. Those homesteaders, they're not going to last. The first hard winter, the first drought, the first time the cattle trample their crops, they'll give up and move on. They always do. But if you insist on protecting them, on enforcing laws that don't fit reality, you're going to force me to take measures I'd rather avoid. Cole stood as well, matching Hale's posture. That sounds like a threat. It's a fact. I have contracts to fulfill, investors to answer to, men depending on me for their livelihood. I can't let a handful of dreamers with plows destroy everything I've built. And I can't let you run roughshod over the law. They stood there, two men on opposite sides of a divide neither could cross, while the night pressed against the windows, and Hale's men waited outside. Finally, Hale straightened. I came here tonight hoping we could reach an understanding. I see now that was optimistic. Probably was. Hale moved toward the door, then paused. I've seen men like you before, Marshal. Good men, honorable men, men who believed the law was sacred. I've buried most of them. He turned back, and there was something almost sad in his expression. The West is changing, Maddox. The question is whether you're going to change with it or get crushed by it. Same question applies to you, Hale. The rancher's smile returned. The difference is, I have the power to shape that change. You just have a badge. After Hale and his men rode off, Cole stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the darkness swallow them. The town had gone quiet, that deep quiet that comes in the hours before dawn, when even the drunkest cowboy has finally passed out and the saloons have shuttered their doors. Ben appeared from the shadows of the alley beside the office. Cole wasn't surprised. The kid had good instincts. You were listening, Cole said. Seemed prudent. You want me to rouse the night watch? Have them keep extra eyes on the homesteader camps? Cole shook his head. Hale's not going to move tonight. He's a smart man. Smart men don't start wars in the dark. They build up to them, slow and steady, until everyone thinks the first shot is justified. So what do? We wait. We watch. And we hope those homesteaders have more sense than I think they do. But even as he said it, Cole knew hope was another luxury they couldn't afford. Dawn broke over Abilene like a promise the town couldn't keep. Cole had managed maybe 2 hours of sleep before Ben pounded on his door with news he'd been dreading. Fire on the northern range, the Morgenstern homestead. They rode hard, Cole on his gray gelding, Ben on a chestnut mare, pushing the horses faster than was wise in the gray pre-dawn light. Smoke rose in the distance like a black finger pointing at the sky. Other riders converged from different directions, homesteaders by the look of them, racing toward the same destination. Cole counted at least 8, maybe 10 families out here, their claims scattered along the creek like seeds someone had thrown without pattern. The Morgenstern place, what was left of it, smoldered in the pale morning light. The cabin was gone, reduced to blackened timbers and ash. The small barn had collapsed in on itself. Even the chicken coop was nothing but charred wood. Samuel Morgenstern stood in the ruins, his face streaked with soot and tears. His wife clutched their 2 children behind him, all of them coughing from the smoke. Elias Vorn was already there, along with a dozen other homesteaders, all armed now, all wearing the hard expressions of men who'd just had their worst fears confirmed. Cole dismounted. Anyone hurt? No. Morgenstern's voice was hollow. We got out. That's all that matters, right? We got out. What happened? Middle of the night. We woke to the smell of smoke. By the time we got everyone outside, the whole place was burning. Too fast, too hot. It wasn't an accident, Marshal. This was deliberate. Cole walked the perimeter of the destroyed homestead, reading the story written in ash and hoofprints. At least 6 riders, maybe more. They'd circled the cabin, lit it from multiple sides to ensure it caught fast. Professional work. Not the random violence of drunken cowboys, but a calculated message. "You see anyone?" he asked. Morgenstern shook his head. "It was dark. They were gone before we could get organized, but I know who's responsible. We all know." The other homesteaders murmured agreement, their hands tight on their rifles. "Knowing and proving are different things," Cole said. "Proving?" Vorn stepped forward. "Marshal, you know as well as we do who did this. Hale's men. They came in the night like cowards and burned this family out. What more proof do you need?" "Evidence that would stand up in court, witnesses, something more than suspicion." "While you're gathering evidence, what's to stop them from burning us all out?" another homesteader called out. "You expect us to just wait here like sheep for slaughter?" Cole turned to face them all. "I expect you to let me do my job. I'll investigate this. If I can prove who's responsible, I'll arrest them. That's how the law works." "The law?" Morgenstern laughed bitterly. "The law didn't protect my home. The law didn't protect my children. What good is your law, Marshal?" Cole had no answer for that, not one that would satisfy them. "I want you all to go back to your claims," he said instead. "Stay alert. Post watches at night. Don't go anywhere alone. And for the love of everything, don't start shooting at shadows. If you kill some innocent cowboy because you're scared, you'll be the ones in my jail cells." They didn't like it. He could see the rebellion in their eyes, the anger looking for an outlet, but they also knew he was right. Starting a shooting war would only get them all killed. Slowly, reluctantly, they dispersed, riding back to their various claims. Cole noticed they rode in groups now, not alone. Smart. Fear was making them smarter. Vorn was the last to leave. He sat on his horse, looking down at Cole with something between respect and disappointment. "My family came out here believing in the promise of this country," he said. "We believed that if we worked hard, followed the law, we could build something worth leaving to our children. Are you telling me that's a lie?" "I'm telling you it's more complicated than anyone in Washington understands," Cole replied. "The law says the land is yours, but Hale's been here longer, and he's got the power to make his version of reality stick. Somewhere between your rights and his power, there's a space where men like me try to keep people alive. That's all I can promise you. I can't give you justice. I can only try to keep you breathing long enough to maybe see it happen." Vorn nodded slowly. "Then we'll do what we have to do to keep breathing, Marshal, with or without your law." He rode off, leaving Cole alone with Ben among the smoking ruins. "You believe him?" Ben asked. "That they'll let you handle this?" "No," Cole said. "They're going to arm themselves, fortify their claims, and the next time someone comes at them in the night, they're going to shoot first and ask questions never, which means Hale's going to have his excuse to escalate." He kicked at a piece of charred wood. "This was never about the land, Ben. This was about power. And men who want power don't negotiate, they conquer." "So what do we do?" Cole looked at the ruins, at the evidence of hate and fear burned into the Kansas soil. "We do what we always do. We try to keep the lid on the pressure cooker and hope it doesn't explode in our faces." But even as he said it, Cole could feel the temperature rising. The investigation went nowhere, as Cole had known it would. He interviewed the neighboring homesteaders. No one had seen anything useful. He rode out to the Hale ranch and questioned the men there. All had alibis, all supported by each other, all delivered with smiles that said they knew Cole couldn't touch them. Hale himself was in Kansas City on business, according to his foreman, a hard case named Luther Grimes. The alibi was probably even true. Men like Hale didn't get their hands dirty. They just set things in motion and watched from a distance. Cole filed his report with the mayor, documenting everything he'd found and couldn't prove. Webb read it, sighed, and filed it away. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," the mayor said. "Escalation. Retaliation. Before you know it, we'll have open warfare." "Then help me prevent it," Cole said. "Put pressure on Hale. Make it clear the town won't tolerate this kind of violence." "The town depends on Hale's business, Marshal. We can't afford to alienate him. And you can't afford to let him terrorize settlers either. Eventually, Washington is going to notice. They'll send federal marshals, maybe even the army. You want that kind of attention? Webb paled. You wouldn't. I would if I have to. My job is to enforce the law and keep the peace. If I can't do both, I'll pick the one that leaves fewer people dead. He left the mayor's office and found the town buzzing with rumors. The fire had become common knowledge, and everyone had an opinion. The cowboys and merchants sided with Hale, couldn't blame a man for protecting his interests. The few townspeople who sympathized with the homesteaders kept quiet, afraid of reprisals. Abilene was choosing sides. That night, Cole sat in his office, cleaning his gun and thinking about the patterns he'd seen in his career. The build-up to violence always followed the same script. First came the provocations, stolen livestock, vandalized property, intimidation. Then the retaliations, fists turning to knives, knives to guns. Finally, the point of no return, where pride and fear combined into something unstoppable. They were in the middle act now, moving toward the finale. The question was whether Cole could change the script before the curtain fell. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting visitors at this hour, which meant trouble. Dr. Hendricks stood in the doorway, his medical bag in hand and worry etched across his face. Marshal, I need to speak with you, privately. Cole gestured him inside. Hendricks closed the door and sat down heavily. I've been treating people in this town for 7 years, the doctor began. Cowboys, merchants, homesteaders, I don't care about the politics. A broken bone is a broken bone, whether it belongs to a rancher or a farmer. I appreciate that, Doc. What's this about? I was called out to treat one of Hale's men tonight. Fellow named Carver took a bad fall from his horse, broke his leg. While I was setting the bone, he was talking. Fever made him loose-lipped. He kept apologizing to someone named Tom, saying it wasn't supposed to burn so hot, that they'd only meant to scare them. Cole leaned forward. You say anything else? Just kept repeating that Grimes promised no one would get hurt, that it was just supposed to be a warning. Marshal, I'm a man of science, not law, but it seems to me this Carver was talking about the Morgenstern fire. Can you swear to that in court? Hendricks hesitated. Testify against Hale's men? That would destroy my practice. Half this town works for Hale in one way or another. If I'm seen as an enemy, he trailed off, the implications clear. I understand, Doc, but if you want me to stop this from getting worse, I need something I can use. Use it then, but I can't testify publicly. I have a family, Marshal, a daughter in St. Louis who depends on the money I send. If I lose my practice, Cole held up a hand. I get it. You've already done more than most would. Go home, Doc. Keep this conversation to yourself. After Hendricks left, Cole sat in the darkness, weighing his options. He had a confession, secondhand and unusable in court. He had a name, Carver, and enough to bring the man in for questioning. But bringing in one of Hale's men would be the same as declaring war, unless he did it so clean, so right, that even Hale couldn't retaliate without looking guilty. The idea formed slowly, like ice crystallizing. It was risky. It might get him killed, but it was the only play that might break the cycle before it consumed everyone. Cole stood, checked his gun one more time, and headed for the door. Ben! He called out. His deputy appeared from the back room, still half asleep. Yeah, boss? We're going hunting. Saddle the horses. Now. It's past midnight. Best time for it. Carver and his crew are sleeping off the night's drinking at the line shack near Broken Creek. We're going to bring him in before anyone knows we're coming. Ben was suddenly wide awake. That's Hale territory. That's Kansas territory, Cole corrected, and I'm a Kansas Marshal. Let's go remind people what that means. They rode through the night, 2 men against the darkness and everything that waited in it. The moon was a sliver, giving just enough light to navigate by. Cole knew this country. He'd spent weeks learning every trail, every creek, every possible escape route and ambush point. The line shack sat in a small valley, sheltered by cottonwoods. Smoke rose from its chimney, and horses stood in the corral beside it. 4, maybe 5 men inside. Cole and Ben dismounted 100 yards out and approached on foot. The element of surprise was the only advantage they had. At the door, Cole paused, listening. Inside, someone was snoring. Good, Sleep made men sloppy. He kicked the door in hard enough to rip it from its hinges. "Nobody move! Hands where I can see them!" Chaos. 4 men scrambling for guns in the darkness, cursing and shouting. Cole fired once into the ceiling, the shot deafening in the confined space. "Next man who reaches for iron gets it in the chest. Federal Marshal, you're all under arrest." Ben had his gun out too, covering the room. The men froze, caught between sleep and panic. Cole's eyes adjusted quickly. He spotted Carver immediately, bandaged leg propped on a chair, face white with pain and fear. "You," Cole pointed at him, "you're coming with me. The rest of you stay put. You so much as twitch wrong, my deputy here will drop you where you stand. Ben here's a nervous sort, liable to shoot at anything that moves." Ben, to his credit, played along, his gun hand shaking just enough to sell the act. Cole hauled Carver up, the man yelping as his broken leg dragged. "Sorry about your leg, son. Should have thought of that before you went around burning people's homes." "I didn't." "Save it for the judge." They made it outside without shots being fired, which Cole counted as a small miracle. Ben kept his gun on the door while Cole got Carver onto a horse, tying his hands to the saddle horn. "Boss," Ben hissed. "Company." Riders, coming fast. At least 8 of them. "Mount up," Cole ordered. They rode hard for Abilene, Carver's horse in the middle, Cole and Ben flanking him. Behind them, Hale's men gave chase, their shouts cutting through the night. But Cole knew this country better. He led them through a dry wash, up a steep embankment that the pursuing riders couldn't navigate in the dark, and across a creek that hid their tracks. By the time they hit the outskirts of Abilene, they'd lost their pursuers. The town was just waking up when they rode down Main Street. Cole made sure everyone saw them, the marshal bringing in one of Hale's men, proof that the law still mattered. They locked Carver in the cell, and Cole sent Ben to wake Judge Morrison. They'd need a quick hearing before Hale could mobilize. "You've made a mistake, Marshal," Carver said from behind the bars. "Mr. Hale ain't going to stand for this. Mr. Hale can take his objections to the judge, same as anyone else." Cole sat down at his desk, suddenly exhausted. "Or he can admit he ordered the arson and join you in that cell. Your choice how you want to play this." Before Carver could respond, the door burst open. Luther Grimes stood there, Hale's foreman, flanked by 6 armed men. "Release my man, Marshal, now!" Cole didn't stand. He just looked at Grimes with the kind of tired patience he reserved for children throwing tantrums. "Can't do that, Luther. He's under arrest for arson. He'll have his day in court." "On whose authority?" "Mine." Cole gestured to his badge. "Says so right here." "Mr. Hale's going to want to talk to you about this." "I imagine he will. Tell him I'll be right here doing my job. He wants to discuss it. He knows where to find me." Grimes's hand moved toward his gun. Cole's hand was already there, resting on the butt of his Colt. "Think carefully," Cole said softly. "You draw on a federal marshal. That's not just a local matter anymore. That's a hanging offense, and not even Hale can save you from that rope." The moment stretched out. Cole could see the calculation in Grimes's eyes, the weighing of options. Finally, the foreman stepped back. "This ain't over." "Never is," Cole agreed. After they left, Ben let out a breath he'd been holding. "That was too close." "It's going to get closer," Cole said. "But we did something today, Ben. We showed this town that the law can still bite. Whether that's enough?" He shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." Judge Morrison conducted the hearing in his chambers, a small room above the land office. It was quick and dirty. Carver refused to talk without a lawyer, but the circumstantial evidence was enough for the judge to order him held for trial. News spread through Abilene like fire. The homesteaders saw it as vindication, proof that Cole was on their side. The cattle interests saw it as a declaration of war. And the merchants, caught in the middle, just saw their profits about to go up in smoke. That night, the town held its breath, and somewhere out on the dark prairie, Victor Hale was coming home. Victor Hale returned to Abilene 3 days later, and the town knew it before he even crossed the city limits. Word traveled fast on the frontier. A rider spotted his entourage 20 miles out, and by the time the sun reached its zenith, every merchant had shuttered their windows, every mother had pulled her children inside, and every man who owned a gun had checked to make sure it was loaded. Cole stood on the boardwalk watching the dust cloud approach. Beside him, Ben shifted his weight nervously. "How many you think?" the deputy asked. Enough. Cole's voice was flat. He'd counted at least 30 riders in the column, maybe more. An army, not a delegation. They came down Main Street like a parade of conquest, horses perfectly arranged, men sitting tall in their saddles. At the front rode Hale, dressed in black, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. He looked like a judge coming to pass sentence. The column stopped in front of the marshal's office. Hale dismounted slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving Cole's face. "Marshal Maddox." His voice carried the same cultured tone as before, but something cold lurked beneath it now. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have a prisoner charged with arson," Cole replied. "He belongs to the law until his trial. Carver is my employee. He was following my orders. If there's blame to be assigned, it falls on me." Cole raised an eyebrow. "That a confession?" "That's the truth. I ordered a warning delivered to squatters on my grazing land. If things got out of hand, that's my responsibility, not his." "Then I guess you're under arrest too." Cole's hand moved to his gun. "You want to come quietly, or should we make this interesting?" For a long moment, the street held its breath. 30 guns against 2. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Then Hale smiled. "You've got brass, Marshal. I'll give you that. But arresting me won't solve your problem. It'll only create new ones. My problem is enforcing the law. You just admitted to ordering a crime. That makes this simple." "Nothing is simple in the West." Hale gestured at the buildings around them. "You see this town? I built it. Every nail, every board, every dollar that flows through these businesses came from my cattle. You arrest me, and Abilene dies. The drives will go elsewhere. The merchants will go bankrupt. This entire place will dry up and blow away like dust. That a threat? That's economics. The frontier doesn't run on justice, Marshal. It runs on money, and I control the money." Cole had heard variations of this speech before. Rich men always thought their wealth made them invincible, that the rules that bound ordinary people didn't apply to them. Sometimes they were right, but not today. "Ben," Cole said quietly, "if Mr. Hale moves toward his gun, shoot him." Ben's hand went to his weapon. The deputy's face was pale, but his jaw was set. "You'd really do this?" Hale's smile faded. "Start a war you can't possibly win? I'd really enforce the law. Win or lose doesn't enter into it." They stood there, 2 men who'd drawn lines in the dirt and refused to step back. Behind Hale, his men waited for the signal. Behind Cole, the town watched to see what kind of man their marshal really was. It was Dutch Kearney who broke the stalemate. The saloon owner pushed through the gathered crowd, his massive frame cutting a path. "Victor," he said, his voice careful, "maybe we should talk about this. Get the lawyers involved. Do this proper." "Stay out of this, Dutch." "Can't do that. You start shooting up my street, you're bad for business." Dutch looked at Cole. "Marshal, what if Mr. Hale posts bond for Carver? We get this into court, let the judge sort it out legal-like?" Cole considered. It wasn't the outcome he wanted, but it was better than a bloodbath. "Judge Morrison sets the bond, and Hale stays in town until trial." "Agreed," Dutch said quickly, before Hale could object. "Victor, that work for you?" Hale's eyes never left Cole's face. "Fine. We'll play it your way, Marshal. For now." He turned and walked toward the courthouse, his men following like a tide. Cole didn't relax until they'd rounded the corner. "That was close," Ben breathed. "That was just the opening move," Cole said. "Real game hasn't even started yet." Judge Morrison set Carver's bond at $5,000, a sum that would have bankrupted most men, but barely dented Hale's fortune. The rancher paid it in cash, counted out on the judge's desk in neat stacks of bills. Carver walked out of jail an hour later, free until trial. The homesteaders took the news badly. Cole was making his evening rounds when Elias Vorn intercepted him outside the general store. The farmer's face was tight with barely controlled anger. "You let him go." It wasn't a question. "Judge set bail. That's how the system works." "The system." Vorn spat the word. "The system burns down homes and walks away with a smile. That's your idea of justice, Marshal?" "My idea of justice is a fair trial and a proper verdict, but that only works if people let it happen. You start taking matters into your own hands. You become the criminal. And if we don't? If we just wait patiently while Hale picks us off one by one? Vorn stepped closer. I've got 18 families out there, Marshal. Men, women, children who came here believing this country would protect them. What am I supposed to tell them? Trust the law? Trust a system that lets our enemies buy their way out of consequences? Cole met his gaze steadily. You're supposed to tell them to be smart. Fortify your claims. Post guards. Stay together. Give me time to build a case that'll stick. Time. Vorn laughed bitterly. Time is what Hale's buying with that bond. Time to plan. Time to strike again. You think we're fools, Marshal? I think you're scared, and scared men make bad decisions. Vorn's hand went to the pistol at his hip, and for a heartbeat, Cole thought he'd have to draw on a man he was trying to protect. Then the farmer's hand dropped. We trusted you, Vorn said quietly. We believed you were different. I see now that was naive. He walked away, leaving Cole alone on the darkening street. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played in one of the saloons. Cowboys laughed and shouted. Life in Abilene ground on, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Ben found him an hour later, still standing in the same spot. You okay, boss? Define okay. Cole turned to face his deputy. We're losing them, Ben. The homesteaders. They're going to take matters into their own hands, and when they do, Hale will have every excuse he needs to wipe them out. Can't really blame them. Carver admits to the fire and walks free. That'd make anyone question the system. The system isn't perfect, but it's all that stands between civilization and chaos. Once people stop believing in it, once they decide might makes right, there's no going back. So what do we do? Cole started walking toward the office. We keep working the case. There has to be something we can use, something that ties Hale directly to the arson. Carver's testimony, financial records, witnesses we haven't found yet. Somewhere there's a thread we can pull that'll unravel the whole thing. But even as he said it, Cole knew they were running out of time. The next morning brought fresh complications. Cole was reviewing the case files when Theodore Alcott, the railroad agent, burst into the office. Marshal, we've got a problem. What kind? The territorial governor's office sent a telegram. They're dispatching an investigator to look into reports of civil unrest. Should arrive within the week. Cole looked up sharply. Who requested the investigation? Officially, anonymous complaint. But the timing's suspicious. Right after you arrest one of Hale's men, my guess is someone's trying to make you look incompetent. Or they're trying to get me removed. Cole stood and grabbed his hat. Territorial investigator shows up, starts asking questions, makes recommendations to the governor. Next thing you know, I'm out and they install someone more cooperative. You think Hale has that kind of reach? I think Hale has money, and money reaches everywhere. Cole buckled his gun belt. How long do we have? 5, maybe 6 days. The investigator's coming from Topeka. 6 days to solve a case that was already falling apart. Cole had worked with worse odds, but not by much. He spent the rest of the day riding out to the homesteader camps, warning them about the investigation, urging them to stay calm and lawful. Most listened politely and ignored every word. He could see it in their eyes. They'd already decided the law couldn't protect them, so they'd protect themselves. At the Vorn homestead, he found something that confirmed his worst fears. The families had pooled their resources and hired 3 men from Dodge City, professional guns, by the hard look of them, men who solved problems with violence because that was all they knew. This is a mistake, Cole told Vorn. This is survival, the farmer replied. You had your chance to make the law work, Marshal. Now we'll try it our way. Your way gets people killed. Hale's way already has. At least now we'll die fighting instead of waiting. Cole rode back to Abilene as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. That night he sat in his office with a bottle of whiskey and the case files spread across his desk. Somewhere in these pages there had to be something useful, a connection, a contradiction, a piece of evidence that would break the whole thing open. Ben worked beside him, going through witness statements for the 3rd time. Boss, you ever think maybe we're fighting a losing battle here? Every day, Cole admitted. But the alternative is giving up, and I'm not quite ready for that yet. What happens if the investigator decides you're the problem? If they pull your badge? Then I become a private citizen with a grudge and a gun. Won't change what needs doing, just changes my authority to do it. Ben smiled faintly. Somehow, I don't think that'd stop you. Shouldn't stop any man who gives a damn about right and wrong. They worked through the night, fueled by coffee and stubbornness. Around 3 in the morning, Cole found something. A bill of sale from 2 months prior. Hale purchasing 20 gallons of coal oil from the general store, more than any ranch would need for lamps and normal use. Ben, look at this. His deputy leaned over. Could be innocent. Ranches use oil for all kinds of things. Could be. But combined with Carver's fever confession and the timing of the purchase, Cole tapped the paper. It's not proof, but it's another thread. We keep pulling, maybe something unravels. The next day, Cole interviewed Harold Grissom at the general store. The merchant was nervous, wringing his hands as he confirmed the sale. Yes, Mr. Hale bought oil from me, but lots of people buy oil, Marshal. Doesn't mean anything. Did he say what he needed it for? Winter supplies, he said, for the line shacks. In the middle of summer? Grissom shifted uncomfortably. Look, Marshal, I just sell goods. What people do with them isn't my concern. It is if those goods are used to commit crimes. You asking me to testify against Victor Hale? Because I won't do it. I can't afford to lose his business. Cole had expected as much. Fear was Hale's real power, the knowledge that crossing him meant economic ruin. The entire town was built on that foundation, and challenging it meant toppling everything. He left the store and nearly collided with Mayor Webb on the boardwalk. Marshal, a word. Webb's face was flushed, his breathing heavy. I've been hearing disturbing reports. The homesteaders have hired gunmen. That true? It is. And you allowed this? I don't have authority to tell citizens who they can or can't employ. As long as they're not breaking laws, this is exactly the kind of escalation I warned you about. Webb grabbed Cole's arm. The investigator arrives in 4 days. If he finds Abilene on the brink of a range war, he'll blame you. He'll say, you inflame tensions instead of calming them. Cole pulled his arm free. Maybe if this town had backed the law instead of backing Hale, we wouldn't be in this situation. We have to be practical, Marshal. Idealism doesn't pay bills or feed families. And corruption doesn't build a future worth having. Cole started to walk away, then stopped. You know what the real tragedy is, Mayor? You're so afraid of losing what you have that you're willing to let Hale destroy what this place could become. That's not pragmatism. That's cowardice. He left Webb sputtering on the boardwalk and headed for the telegraph office. If the territorial investigator was coming anyway, Cole might as well use it to his advantage. He composed a message to the U.S. Marshal's office in Kansas City, detailing the situation and requesting federal support. It was a long shot. The federal marshals were spread thin across the territories, but it was worth trying. The telegraph operator, a thin man named Jessup, read the message and paled. Marshal, if word gets out that you're requesting federal intervention, then people will know I'm serious about enforcing the law. Send it. Jessup hesitated, then began tapping out the message. As the clicks filled the small office, Cole felt a small measure of satisfaction. He was done playing politics. The situation was too far gone for half measures. The response came 3 hours later, brief and unhelpful. No federal marshals available. Handle locally. Good luck. So much for backup. Cole was walking back to his office when he heard the commotion from the north end of town. Shouting, horses, the sound of something breaking. He broke into a run, Ben appearing from somewhere to join him. They found chaos at the livery stable. A group of cowboys, Hale's men, by the brands on their horses, had cornered 2 of the homesteaders who'd come to town for supplies. The farmers were backed against the stable wall, surrounded by 6 angry riders. You nesters think you can bring guns to this range? Grimes, Hale's foreman, sat on his horse like a king on a throne. Think you can threaten us on our own land? This isn't your land, one of the homesteaders shot back. We've got legal claims. Legal claims don't mean spit out here, boy. Only thing that matters is power, and you don't have any. Cole pushed through the gathering crowd. That's enough, Grimes. Let them go. The foreman turned, his face splitting into a cruel smile. Well, if it isn't the marshal, come to protect your pet farmers? Come to stop you from doing something stupid. These men haven't broken any laws. Move along. They brought hired guns to the range. That's a threat. That's their right. You don't like it, file a complaint, but you lay a hand on them, and you'll be the ones in my jail. Grimes dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. You know what your problem is, Maddox. You don't know which side you're on. I'm on the side of the law. The law, Grimes spat. The law is whatever Mr. Hale says it is. The sooner you accept that, the longer you'll live. Cole's hand moved to his Colt. That sounds like a threat. That's a fact. You keep pushing, and you're going to find out just how far Mr. Hale's reach extends. They stood facing each other, the crowd forming a circle around them. Cole could feel the weight of expectation pressing down. Everyone wanted to see if the Marshal would back down or stand his ground. Last chance, Cole said quietly. Get on your horse and ride out, or I arrest you for intimidation and threatening a federal officer. Your choice. For a heartbeat, Cole thought Grimes would draw. The foreman's hand twitched, his eyes calculating odds. Then, slowly, he stepped back. Not worth it, Grimes said. Not yet. He mounted his horse, his men following suit. As they rode away, Grimes called back over his shoulder. Clock's ticking, Marshal. Investigators coming. And when he hears how you've been playing favorites, choosing settlers over the men who built this town, you'll be finished. After they were gone, Cole helped the two homesteaders gather their supplies. You boys should stay out of town for a while, he advised. Stock up good, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Appreciate what you did, Marshal, one of them said. But Grimes is right about one thing. You can't be everywhere, can't protect everyone. I can try. Trying ain't enough, not anymore. They left with their supplies loaded on a wagon, and Cole watched them go with a heavy sense of inevitability. The pieces were all moving now, sliding toward a collision he couldn't prevent. That evening, Dr. Hendricks came to the office again, his face grave. I've been making rounds at the homestead camps, he said. Treating minor ailments, checking on pregnant women, the usual. But I'm seeing something that worries me. What's that? They're preparing for war, Marshal, not just hiring guns, but stockpiling ammunition, building fortifications, organizing militia drills. The Vorn homestead looks like a military camp. Cole rubbed his tired eyes. Can't say I'm surprised. Fear makes people do desperate things. It's worse than that. They're planning something. I overheard one of the hired guns talking about sending a message. I don't know what that means, but it sounded aggressive. You get any details? No. They shut up when they noticed me. But Marshal, if the homesteaders strike first, if they attack Hale's men or property, then the whole narrative flips, Cole finished. Hale becomes the victim. They become the aggressors, and any hope of legal resolution goes out the window. Exactly. You need to stop them. I need evidence of what they're planning first. Can't arrest people for having conversations. Hendricks left, and Cole sat in the gathering darkness, thinking. He needed to get ahead of whatever the homesteaders were planning, but he also couldn't leave town undefended. Hale's men were circling like wolves, looking for any opening. He made a decision he knew he'd probably regret. Ben, I need you to ride out to the Vorn place. Keep your eyes open, find out what they're planning. Don't confront them, just observe and report back. You sure that's wise? They catch me spying. Tell them you're there to help coordinate defense. They know you're young, might buy that you're sympathetic. Just be careful. After Ben left, Cole made his own rounds, checking every business, every corner, every shadow where trouble might be brewing. The town felt different tonight, charged with tension like the air before a thunderstorm. He was walking past the Longhorn when Dutch Kearney stepped out. Marshal, got a minute? They went inside to Dutch's private office behind the bar. The saloon owner poured 2 drinks without asking and pushed one across the desk. I'm hearing things, Dutch said. Disturbing things. Hale's talking about taking matters into his own hands. Says if the law won't protect his interests, he'll do it himself. That's nothing new. This is different. He's organizing his men, bringing in more from his other ranches. Word is he's planning to drive the homesteaders out one way or another. Cole sipped the whiskey, letting it burn down his throat. When? Soon. Maybe days. And here's the thing that worries me. He's got support. The merchants are scared. They see their businesses dependent on the cattle drives, and they see the homesteaders as a threat to that. If Hale moves against them, the town might not stand in his way. What about you? Dutch smiled grimly. I sell whiskey, Marshal. I don't pick sides. But I also don't want my town burning down. That's bad for everyone's business. Then help me stop it. Use your influence, tell the merchants that violence will bring federal attention they don't want. Make them see that supporting Hale's war will destroy Abilene faster than any homesteader. I can try. But fear's a powerful motivator, and these men are scared. Cole stood to leave, then paused. Dutch, if it comes down to choosing sides, which way do you fall? The saloon owner took a long moment before answering. I fall on the side of Abilene surviving. However, that has to happen. It wasn't the answer Cole wanted, but it was honest. He could respect that. Ben returned near midnight, his horse lathered with sweat. They're planning to cut the cattle trail, he reported breathlessly. The homesteaders. They're going to string barbed wire across the main route Hale uses to bring his herds to market. Force him to go around, make it clear they control that land now. Cole's blood went cold. When? Day after tomorrow. They figure it'll be a symbolic victory. Show Hale he can't just do whatever he wants. It'll be a massacre, Cole said flatly. Hale brings a herd through and finds wire across the trail. He'll tear through it and anyone standing in his way. Those homesteaders will be crushed. What do we do? Cole grabbed his hat. We ride out there right now and talk sense into them. Make them understand they're signing their own death warrants. They rode through the darkness, pushing their horses hard. The Vorn homestead was lit up like a celebration. Men gathered around bonfires, passing bottles and talking in excited voices. They fell silent as Cole and Ben rode up. Elias Vorn stepped forward, his face unreadable in the firelight. Marshal, little late for a social call. Cole dismounted. I know what you're planning, Elias. The barbed wire. It's a mistake. It's our land. We have every right to fence it. Not the trail. That's been in use for 12 years. Hale has an easement claim that'll hold up in court. You block it, you're the ones breaking the law. So we're supposed to let his cattle trample our crops? Destroy our property? Where's the law then? I'm trying to prevent bloodshed. You string that wire, Hale will see it as an act of war. He'll come through with everything he's got, and your legal claims won't stop bullets. One of the hired guns stepped into the light, a lean man with cold eyes. Maybe that's what we want. Hale makes a move, we defend ourselves. Law says we got that right. You're looking for a fight, Cole said. That makes you the aggressors. We're looking for respect, Vorn corrected. We've been patient, Marshal. We've waited for your law to protect us. We watched Morgenstern's home burn and saw the man responsible walk free. We've endured insults and threats. Now we're drawing a line. They cross it, they'll pay the price. Cole looked around at the gathered faces, seeing the determination there, the anger that had been building for weeks. These weren't professional gunmen looking for glory. These were desperate men who'd run out of options. You think you can win this fight? Cole asked quietly. Hale has 50 men, maybe more. Professional cowboys who've been handling guns since they could walk. You've got farmers and 3 hired guns. The mathematics don't add up. Some things are worth dying for. Morgenstern spoke up from the crowd. They burned my home. My children could have died. You expect me to just accept that? I expect you to be smart. Let me do my job. The investigator from Topeka will be here in 3 days. Let him see that you're the victims, that Hale's the aggressor. Give me that time. Vorn shook his head. We gave you time, Marshal. We trusted you. But trust without results is just hope, and hope doesn't feed families or protect children. The wire goes up tomorrow. If Hale wants to make something of it, that's his choice. Cole knew he'd lost them. He could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. They'd made their decision, and nothing he said would change it. Then I'll be there, he said. When Hale comes, I'll be standing between you and him. Maybe that'll make him think twice. Or maybe it'll just get you killed alongside us, one of the hired guns said. But that's your choice to make. Cole and Ben rode back to Abilene in silence. There was nothing left to say. The trap had been set, the players were in position, and somewhere in the darkness the clock was ticking down toward disaster. As they reached the edge of town, Ben finally spoke. You really going to stand with them? Against Hale and all his men? I'm going to stand for the law, Cole replied, wherever that takes me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. The next morning dawned clear and bright, mockingly beautiful for what it would bring. Cole stood on the boardwalk, drinking coffee and watching the town wake up. Merchants opened their stores, cowboys stumbled out of hotels, nursing hangovers. Normal life grinding forward with the desperate momentum of people trying to ignore the approaching storm. Word of the homesteaders' plan had spread. Cole could see it in the way people looked at him, in the nervous conversations that stopped when he walked past. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know if they'd survive it. The territorial investigator arrived a day early, stepping off the noon train with a leather satchel and an expression of profound disapproval. His name was Carson Reed, and everything about him screamed bureaucrat, pressed suit, polished shoes, the kind of face that had never seen real hardship. Cole met him at the station. Marshal Maddox, I presume. Reed's handshake was limp. I've been sent to evaluate reports of civil unrest and possible law enforcement misconduct. Happy to cooperate, Cole lied. What do you need? Access to all your case files, financial records, arrest logs. I'll also be conducting interviews with citizens to get a full picture of the situation. Might want to hurry, Cole said. Situation's about to get a lot more complicated. Reed frowned. What does that mean? Means we're about 48 hours from an explosion, maybe less. You want to understand what's happening here, you better get to work. He left Reed at the hotel and went back to his office, where a message was waiting. One of the homesteaders had ridden into town with news that made Cole's stomach drop. The wire was already up. Cole rode north at a gallop, leaving a trail of dust that hung in the still air like smoke. Ben struggled to keep pace, his younger horse laboring to match the gray's stride. The barbed wire stretched across the cattle trail 3 miles outside town, strung between fence posts the homesteaders had driven deep into the hard Kansas earth during the night. It was a statement written in steel and defiance. Elias Vorn stood beside the fence line with 15 men, all armed, all watching the horizon where Hale's herd would eventually appear. The wire gleamed in the morning sun, 4 strands pulled tight across a trail that had been open range for as long as anyone could remember. Cole reined in hard enough to make his horse rear. What the hell were you thinking? Vorn met his gaze without flinching. We were thinking it's time to make our position clear. This is our land, Marshal. Federal land that we've claimed legally and worked honestly. The cattle drives don't own it anymore. You just declared war. Cole gestured at the wire. Hale's got a herd coming through here by tomorrow at the latest. 2,000 head of cattle worth $50,000 at market. You think he's going to turn them around because you put up some wire? I think he's going to have to acknowledge that the open range is closed. That's how progress works, Marshal. The old ways make room for the new. One of the hired guns, the cold-eyed man from the night before, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Hale wants a fight. We'll give him one. Been spoiling for it anyway. You're going to get people killed, Cole said. Women and children. Is that the progress you're talking about? Women and children are already at risk, Morgenstern spoke up. They were at risk when my home burned. They're at risk every day we let Hale think he can do whatever he wants without consequences. Cole turned his horse in a tight circle, trying to think past the anger that was building in his chest. These men weren't wrong about their rights, but they were wrong about everything else. Timing, tactics, the realities of frontier violence, all of it wrong. Listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to the hard tone he reserved for dangerous moments. There's a territorial investigator in town right now. He's here to evaluate the situation, make recommendations to the governor. If he sees you as the aggressors, if this wire makes you look like the ones escalating, you lose everything. Federal support, public sympathy, legal protection, all of it gone. And if we do nothing? Vorn's voice was tight. If we just keep waiting for justice that never comes, what then? Then you stay alive long enough for the system to work. The system burned Morgenstern's home and let the man responsible walk free on bail. Forgive us if we don't share your faith. There was no answer Cole could give that would satisfy them. They'd crossed a line and now everyone would have to live with the consequences. He pulled his horse alongside Vorn's position. When Hale comes, I'll be here, standing between you and him. Maybe that'll buy enough time to negotiate something. Or maybe you'll just die with us, the hired gun said with a cruel smile. But like you said, that's your choice. Cole rode back to Abilene with Ben, his mind racing through possibilities, all of them bad. The investigator would hear about the wire within hours. The merchants would panic. Hale would mobilize every man he had. And somewhere in the chaos, innocent people would die. "What's the play here, boss?" Ben asked as they neared town. "The play is damage control. We can't stop what's coming, but maybe we can limit how bad it gets." Cole's jaw was set. "Get to the telegraph office, send word to every lawman within 50 miles. We need witnesses. We need documentation. We need something on record that shows we tried to prevent this." "You think anyone will come?" "No. But we make the effort anyway." They split up at the edge of town, Ben heading for the telegraph office, while Cole went to find Carson Reed. The investigator was in the hotel dining room, interviewing Mayor Webb over coffee and pastries that neither man seemed to be eating. "Marshal Maddox," Reed said as Cole approached. "We were just discussing the economic impact of the cattle trade on Abilene's development. The economic impact is about to become a historical footnote." Cole pulled up a chair without being invited. "The homesteaders have strung barbed wire across the main cattle trail. Hale's got a herd coming through, and when those cattle hit that fence, people are going to die." Webb's face went pale. "They actually did it? After everything we discussed, they're scared and desperate, which makes them dangerous." Cole looked at Reed. "You wanted to evaluate the situation? Well, here it is in full bloom. You've got two forces moving toward collision, and I've got a badge and two hands to stop it. So I'm asking officially for territorial support. Send troops, send more marshals, send whatever you've got." Reed carefully set down his coffee cup. "Marshal, my job is to observe and report, not to intervene in local disputes. This stopped being local when federal homestead claims got involved. This is about whether the United States government stands behind its own laws. The government stands behind order and stability. From what I've observed, you've allowed this situation to deteriorate to the point of open conflict. That doesn't reflect well on your competence." Cole felt the anger rising, but kept his voice level. "I enforced the law. I arrested the man responsible for arson. I've tried to protect both sides from their worst impulses, but I can't hold back an ocean with my bare hands." "Perhaps if you'd been more diplomatic, more willing to find compromise." "There is no compromise between legal and illegal, Mr. Reed. Either the homesteaders have rights or they don't. Either the law means something or it's just words on paper. I chose to believe it means something. If that's incompetence, then I'm guilty." Webb cleared his throat nervously. "Gentlemen, perhaps we should focus on immediate solutions. Marshal, can't you remove the wire? Tear it down before Hale's herd arrives? That would require me to destroy the homesteaders' legal property on their legal land. Which side of the law am I supposed to enforce, Mayor?" "The side that keeps people alive," Reed said coldly. "Isn't that your primary duty? To preserve life and maintain order?" "My duty is to enforce the law equally. Life and order come from that foundation, not despite it." They stared at each other across the table, two men with incompatible views of how the world should work. Reed saw pragmatism and political calculation. Cole saw principles worth dying for. Neither could understand the other. "I'll be making my report to the governor," Reed finally said, "and it will reflect my concerns about your judgment and effectiveness." Cole stood. "Make whatever report you want. I'll be at the fence line trying to prevent a massacre. You're welcome to join me if you want to see how law enforcement actually works out here." He walked out before Reed could respond, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Outside, the town was buzzing with news of the wire. Cowboys gathered in angry clusters, talking about revenge and teaching the nesters a lesson. Merchants wrung their hands and calculated losses. The few townspeople sympathetic to the homesteaders stayed silent, afraid to draw attention. Dutch Kearney intercepted Cole on the street. "Is it true? They really put up the fence?" "It's true." "Then we're finished. Hale will burn them out, the drives will bypass Abilene, and this town will die." Dutch's face was grim. "All because some farmers wanted to make a point." "All because Hale wouldn't accept that the frontier is changing," Cole corrected. "You can blame the homesteaders if it makes you feel better, but they're just trying to claim what the government promised them." "And what good will those claims be when they're dead?" Cole had no answer for that. Dutch was right, in his way. Principles were cold comfort in a coffin. He spent the rest of the day preparing for the worst. He inventoried the weapons in the Marshal's office: 2 rifles, 3 shotguns, enough ammunition for a sustained fight, but not enough to matter against Hale's numbers. He reviewed maps of the area, looking for defensive positions and escape routes. He wrote letters he hoped no one would ever have to read, including one to his sister in St. Louis, explaining why he died in a nowhere Kansas town over a fence. Ben returned from the telegraph office near sunset, sent messages to 9 different law offices. So far, 1 response. Sheriff in Salina says he sympathizes but can't spare the men. Expected, Cole said. We're on our own. So what's the plan? Cole looked at his young deputy, at the fear barely concealed behind determination. The plan is I ride out to the fence at first light. You stay here and keep order in town. Like hell I do. I'm going with you. Ben, don't. The deputy's voice was firm. Don't tell me it's too dangerous or that you need me here. We both know that's bull. You trained me to back your play, and that's what I'm going to do. Cole felt something in his chest tighten. Pride, maybe. Or fear for this kid who didn't fully understand what he was riding toward. All right, he said quietly, but you follow my orders exactly. When I say move, you move. When I say get down, you hit the dirt. Understood? Understood. They spent the evening cleaning weapons and checking gear with the ritualistic precision of men preparing for battle. Neither spoke much. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said. Around midnight, Dr. Hendricks appeared at the office door with his medical bag. I'm riding out with you tomorrow, he announced. You're going to need a doctor. This isn't your fight, Doc. It is if people are going to bleed. I took an oath to heal, Marshal. That doesn't change just because the injuries come from bullets instead of disease. Cole nodded. Appreciated. But stay back from the line. Patch up whoever needs it, but don't put yourself in the crossfire. I'm not a fool, Marshal, just a doctor who remembers what his job is supposed to be. After Hendricks left, Cole stood on the boardwalk, looking up at the stars scattered across the black Kansas sky. Somewhere out there, Hale's herd was moving, 2,000 head of cattle being driven toward their date with that barbed wire fence. And behind the cattle, Hale's men would come, armed, angry, and ready to make a statement written in blood. The night was quiet, but Cole could feel the violence gathering like a storm just beyond the horizon. Dawn came too fast and too bright. Cole and Ben rode out with Hendricks trailing behind in a wagon loaded with medical supplies. The fence line was already crowded when they arrived. The homesteaders had brought their entire fighting force, 23 men, including the 3 hired guns. They'd built crude barricades from fence rails and dirt, creating a defensive position that would slow down attackers but wouldn't stop a determined assault. The women and children were gone, moved to a fortified homestead 5 miles north. At least someone had shown that much sense. Vorn greeted Cole with a tight nod. Didn't think you'd really come. Said I would. Cole surveyed their preparations. This is a good position, all things considered, but if Hale brings his whole crew, we know the odds, Marshal. We've made our peace with them. Cole dismounted and positioned himself at the center of the fence line, right where the wire crossed the trail. Ben took position to his left, and the homesteaders spread out on either side. They looked like soldiers awaiting battle, and Cole supposed that's exactly what they were. The morning dragged on. The sun climbed higher, turning the prairie into a furnace. Men drank from canteens and checked their weapons over and over, nervous energy seeking outlet. Someone told a joke that fell flat. Another man prayed quietly, his lips moving soundlessly. Cole let them have their rituals. Around noon, one of the homesteaders who'd climbed a fence post for a better view called out, "Dust cloud, coming from the southwest. Big one." Cole raised his field glasses and focused on the horizon. Through the shimmer of heat, he could see it. A massive cloud of dust rising into the sky, kicked up by thousands of hooves. The herd was coming. "Everyone check your weapons," Cole ordered. "But nobody fires unless I give the word. Is that clear?" Murmured acknowledgments rippled down the line. The hired guns looked disappointed, but they nodded. The sound reached them before the cattle did. A low rumble like distant thunder, building steadily until the ground itself seemed to vibrate. Then the herd appeared, a living river of beef and horn flowing across the prairie, driven by cowboys whose shouts carried on the wind. Cole had seen cattle drives before, but the sight never failed to impress. 2,000 animals moving as one mass, guided by men who understood the rhythms of the herd better than they understood civilization. It was beautiful in its way and terrifying in its power. At the head of the drive, Cole spotted Hale on his black stallion, with Luther Grimes and at least 30 armed riders flanking him. The herd kept coming, oblivious to the wire stretched across their path. The cowboys hadn't spotted it yet, still focused on keeping the cattle moving forward. Cole stepped into the middle of the trail, directly in front of the fence, and raised his hand. "Hold!" His voice carried across the distance. "Hold the herd." The lead cowboys saw him now, saw the fence, saw the armed men waiting. The shouts changed from encouragement to alarm as they worked to turn the herd, to slow the massive momentum of 2,000 animals moving at speed. But cattle are not machines. They don't stop on command. The lead animals hit the wire at full speed. The sound was horrific, the snap of wire breaking under impact, the screams of cattle tangled in barbed strands, the bellowing of animals behind pushing forward into the writhing mass ahead. Blood sprayed as barbs tore hide. Steers fell, hooves scrambling, and the cattle behind trampled them, unable to stop. "Turn them!" Hale's voice rang out. "Get them turned before they all pile up." But it was chaos now. The herd had fractured, some animals breaking left, others right, some plunging straight into the wire barrier. Cowboys rode desperately along the flanks, trying to guide the panicked cattle away from the disaster. But momentum had control now. A section of fence collapsed under the weight of bodies. Cattle poured through the gap, trampling the crude barricades the homesteaders had built. Men scattered, diving for safety, as half a ton of panicked beef thundered past. Cole saw it happening in slow motion. A young homesteader, maybe 19 years old, frozen in fear as a steer bore down on him. Cole lunged, grabbing the kid's shirt and hauling him backward. They both hit the ground as the animal's horns slashed the air where the kid's head had been. Gunshots rang out. Cole couldn't tell who fired first, but suddenly bullets were flying. The homesteaders were shooting at the cowboys. The cowboys were shooting back. And in the middle, the cattle ran wild, trampling everything in their path. "Cease fire!" Cole roared, but his voice was lost in the chaos. He saw Grimes drawing a bead on Vorn and shot the gun from the foreman's hand. Grimes howled, clutching his bleeding fingers, but 3 more of Hale's men opened fire in response. A homesteader fell, blood blooming on his chest. Another went down, clutching his leg. The hired guns were returning fire with professional precision, dropping cowboys from their saddles. Ben was shooting, calm and measured, each shot carefully aimed. The kid had never been in a real gunfight before, but he was handling it like a veteran. Cole worked his way toward Hale through the maelstrom of cattle and gunfire. If he could reach the rancher, maybe he could stop this before everyone died. A steer slammed into him, knocking him sideways. Cole rolled, came up with his Colt raised, and found himself face to face with Hale. The rancher sat on his horse like a king surveying a battlefield, his face carved from stone. Blood spattered his fine clothes, and his eyes held a cold fury that promised death. "You did this," Hale said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You chose their side, and now look what's happened." "I chose the law," Cole shot back. "You chose to drive your herd through a legal fence. This is on you." "The law." Hale's laugh was bitter. "Your precious law just killed a dozen of my cattle and maybe a dozen men. Was it worth it, Marshal? All this death for a principle?" Before Cole could answer, a scream cut through the air, higher pitched, younger. A sound that didn't belong on a battlefield. Both men turned. Through the dust and chaos, Cole saw the wagon, the same wagon that had been 5 miles north with the women and children. It was careening across the prairie, pulled by panicked horses, straight toward the stampeding cattle. Someone had brought the families back. Elias Vorn saw it too. "Sarah!" he screamed. "My daughter's in that wagon!" He ran toward it, abandoning his position, abandoning everything except the need to save his child. 3 other homesteaders broke ranks to follow him. The wagon hit a rock and overturned, throwing bodies into the air. Women and children tumbled across the ground, right in the path of the stampeding cattle. Cole was running before his mind caught up with his body. He reached the first child, a girl maybe 6 years old, stunned and bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and scooped her up. Behind him, he heard Ben's voice shouting orders. heard the homesteaders and cowboys working together for the first time to turn the herd away from the fallen wagon. Morgenstern reached a woman pinned under the wagon's wreckage and began lifting the frame. Two of Hale's cowboys jumped from their horses to help, their previous enmity forgotten in the face of immediate need. Cole carried the girl to safety and went back for another child, then another. Around him, the battle had stopped. Men who'd been trying to kill each other moments before were now working desperately to save lives, but they were too late for some. When the cattle finally passed, when the dust began to settle, Cole counted 3 bodies that would never rise again. 2 women and a child, trampled under hooves that knew nothing of hate or politics, just blind panic. Vorn knelt beside one of the women, cradling her broken body, making sounds that weren't quite human. His daughter Sarah stood beside him, alive but in shock, her dress torn and bloody. The homesteader who'd brought the wagon back, thinking he was protecting them, not realizing he was delivering them into catastrophe, sat with his head in his hands, sobbing. Doctor. Hendricks moved among the wounded, his hands quick and sure despite the carnage. He worked on homesteaders and cowboys alike, seeing only patients, only people who needed help. Hale dismounted and walked through the wreckage, his face unreadable. He stopped beside Cole. "You wanted the law to mean something," the rancher said quietly. "You see what it costs?" Cole looked at the bodies, at the blood soaking into the Kansas soil, at the shattered fence and broken men. "I see what happens when pride and fear meet in the middle, when people stop talking and start shooting." "We're past talking now, Marshal. You understand that, don't you? This is war." "Doesn't have to be." Hale's eyes were hard as flint. "It already is. The only question left is who survives it." He mounted his horse and rode away, his men gathering around him. They left the dead cattle where they'd fallen, testament to the price of the day's violence. The homesteaders began collecting their own fallen, preparing them for burial with hands that shook from adrenaline and grief. No one spoke. There was nothing to say that the dead didn't already know. Reed appeared on the edge of the carnage, his face pale, his press suit now dusty from the road. He looked at the scene with the expression of a man watching a nightmare made real. "This is what your law accomplished, Marshal," he said. Cole turned on him, all the rage and frustration of the day finding sudden focus. "This is what happens when Washington makes promises it can't keep, when you tell people they have rights but give them no way to defend those rights. When you send one man with a badge to hold back an ocean of greed and fear and violence." "I'll be recommending your immediate suspension," Reed said. "This situation is clearly beyond your ability to manage." "Good. Suspend me. Replace me. Send someone who thinks they can do better. But understand this. The problem isn't the marshal. It's the territory. It's the fact that you're trying to impose order on chaos without giving people the tools to make it work. You want to blame someone? Look in a mirror." Reed opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked at the bodies again, at the blood and broken dreams scattered across the prairie, and for just a moment, Cole saw something like understanding in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by bureaucratic distance. "I'll be returning to Topeka on tomorrow's train," Reed said. "My report will speak for itself." After he left, Ben approached Cole. The deputy had a cut above his eye and powder burns on his hands, but he was alive. "What happens now?" he asked. Cole looked at the fence line, at the wire still hanging in places, stained with blood and hair from the cattle. He looked at the homesteaders burying their dead, and at Hale's dust cloud disappearing over the horizon. "Now it gets worse," he said. This was just the opening move. That night, Abilene transformed into an armed camp. Hale's men flooded the saloons, drinking hard and talking harder about revenge. The few homesteaders who'd come to town for supplies moved in groups, hands on their weapons, eyes scanning for threats. Cole walked the streets with Ben, their presence a thin line between chaos and catastrophe. They broke up 4 fights, arrested 2 men for disturbing the peace, and prevented what might have been a lynching when some cowboys tried to string up a homesteader they'd accused of shooting one of their friends. Around midnight, Mayor Webb found Cole outside the jail. "This has to stop," the mayor said, his voice trembling. "The town is on the edge of explosion. Every hour that passes, we get closer to complete breakdown." "I'm open to suggestions," Cole replied. "Close the saloons, impose a curfew, Take whatever measures necessary to restore order. Cole considered it. Martial law might buy them time, might cool the temperature enough to prevent more killing, or it might just concentrate the violence, make it worse when it finally erupted. Closing the saloons means cutting off Hale's men from their release valve, he said slowly. They've got all this anger and fear and nowhere to put it. Take away the whiskey, and they'll find other outlets. So what do you propose? I propose we admit that order can't be imposed from outside. It has to come from within. Hale and Vorn need to meet, need to talk, need to find some way to coexist. Otherwise, this town burns and everyone in it. Webb laughed bitterly. You think either of those men is in a mood to negotiate after what happened today? No, but desperation makes people flexible. They've both lost men, lost cattle, lost any illusion that this can be resolved through force alone. Maybe now they're ready to listen. And if they're not? Cole didn't answer. They both knew what happened then. He spent the rest of the night planning the impossible. How to bring two enemies together and make them see reason. By dawn, he had the outline of a strategy. It was desperate, dangerous, and likely to fail. But it was all he had. He was standing in front of the marshal's office, watching the sunrise over Abilene when the first building caught fire. The flames appeared in the merchant district, bright orange against the pale morning sky. By the time Cole and Ben reached it, the dry goods store was fully engulfed, fire roaring through the wooden structure like a living thing. Townspeople formed bucket brigades, but it was too late. The building collapsed in on itself, sending sparks flying toward neighboring structures. Then the general store exploded. Cole knew immediately it wasn't accidental. Someone had placed accelerants, had planned this to maximize damage. As the fire spread, men ran through the streets shouting warnings, and Cole saw fear turn to panic. "It's the Nestors!" someone yelled. "They're burning us out!" "No," another voice countered. "It's Hale's men, making it look like the homesteaders." The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that Abilene was burning, and in the flames, the last restraints on violence were burning too. Cole ran toward the Longhorn Saloon, knowing it would be next. If the fire spread to the liquor stores, the whole town would go up. He found Dutch Kearney organizing a defense, men with wet blankets trying to create a firebreak. "Help us, Marshal! We lose the saloons, we lose everything!" Cole and Ben joined the effort, working alongside merchants and cowboys and anyone else who understood that they all had a stake in Abilene's survival. For precious minutes, shared purpose overcame division. They saved the Longhorn, but 3 other buildings burned to ash. As the fires finally died, leaving behind smoking ruins and the acrid smell of destruction, Cole stood in the middle of Main Street and understood that the war had truly begun. Hale's men hadn't started the fires. Cole had seen homesteaders fleeing the scene, and the homesteaders probably hadn't ordered it either, just some of their hired guns taking initiative, striking back for the deaths at the fence. But it didn't matter who gave the orders. The town was burning, and everyone was looking for someone to blame. As the sun climbed higher, painting the smoke in shades of gold and crimson, Cole made his decision. The time for half measures was over. If Abilene was going to survive, he'd have to do something radical. He'd have to take control, absolutely and completely, and impose order through any means necessary, even if it meant becoming the dictator he'd always sworn he'd never be. Cole stood in the ashes of what had been Grissom's general store, the heat still radiating from the blackened timbers, and made a choice that would either save Abilene or destroy what was left of it. He turned to Ben, his face set with the kind of determination that came from having nothing left to lose. "Round up every deputy you can find. Anyone who's worn a badge, anyone who can be trusted with authority. We're locking this town down." Ben's eyes widened. "Boss, we don't have the legal authority. We have the authority that comes from being the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. Now move." Within an hour, Cole had assembled a force of 12 men. It wasn't much: Ben, 2 former deputies who'd retired to run businesses in town, a handful of citizens who understood that survival trumped politics. But it would have to be enough. They gathered in the marshal's office while smoke still hung over Abilene like a funeral shroud. Cole laid out his plan with the cold precision of a general preparing for siege. Every saloon closes in 1 hour, no exceptions. No alcohol sold, served, or consumed anywhere in town limits until further notice. Dutch Kearney, who'd been summoned to the meeting, exploded. "You can't do that. Those businesses are the lifeblood of this town. You'll destroy the economy." "The economy's already destroyed," Cole cut him off. Those fires burn through $10,000 of merchandise. More buildings will burn if we don't cut off the fuel feeding this war. And I'm not talking about lamp oil, Dutch. I'm talking about the whiskey that's loosening tongues and courage, making men brave enough to do stupid things. The cowboys will riot. Let them try. Any man who causes trouble spends the night in jail. Any man who draws a weapon goes before the judge on charges of disturbing the peace. We're done negotiating. Mayor Webb had arrived during the explanation, his face flushed with panic. Marshal, you're overstepping your authority. The town council hasn't approved. The town council has spent weeks dithering while Abilene burned, Cole said flatly. I'm invoking emergency powers under territorial statute. If you don't like it, file a complaint with the governor. But until someone with more authority than me shows up to stop me, this is how it's going to be. He turned back to his assembled force. 2-man patrols on every major street. No groups larger than 4 people allowed to gather. Anyone carrying a weapon openly gets disarmed and held until they can prove they're not looking for trouble. We're treating this town like the powder keg it is, and we're removing every possible spark. One of the retired deputies, a grizzled man named Hawks, spoke up. What about Hale? He's got 50 armed men camped outside town. They won't take kindly to having their recreation shut down. Then they can take their complaints directly to me. Cole checked his Colt, the gesture unconscious and habitual. I'll be making the rounds personally. Anyone who has a problem with these new rules can discuss it face to face. The patrols dispersed, and Cole made his first stop at the Longhorn. Dutch stood behind the bar, arms crossed, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. This is wrong, Marshal. You're killing my business. Your business will survive. Abilene might not if we don't change course right now. Cole's voice softened slightly. Dutch, I know this hurts, but look at what's happening. 3 dead at the fence, 3 buildings burned, and we're maybe 6 hours from open warfare in these streets. I need time to broker a peace, and I can't do that while everyone's drunk and angry. And if Hale decides to just ride in here and burn the rest of the town, then we fight. But at least we'll be sober when we do it. The Longhorn's closure sent ripples through Abilene faster than the fire had spread. Cowboys from Hale's outfit appeared at the marshal's office within 30 minutes, led by Luther Grimes, his hand still bandaged from where Cole had shot the gun from his grip. You got a lot of nerve, Maddox, Grimes said, his voice tight with pain and fury. Those men have been driving cattle for 3 months. They've earned the right to blow off steam. They can blow it off somewhere else. Abilene's closed for business until I say otherwise. Mr. Hale's not going to like this. Mr. Hale can file that in the same place as everyone else's complaints. Now get off my street before I decide you're violating the no-gathering rule. Grimes smiled, but it was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. You're making enemies you can't afford, Marshal. Men who close saloons don't last long in cattle towns. Men who let towns burn don't deserve to last long anywhere. Cole's hand rested on his gun. We done here? The foreman held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked away. But Cole could feel the threat hanging in the air like smoke. The rest of the afternoon passed in tense patrols. Cole walked every street, his presence alone enough to keep most trouble from starting. He broke up 2 confrontations, arrested 3 men for carrying weapons, and personally escorted a group of homesteaders back to the edge of town when they came in looking for supplies. You can't buy anything today, he told them. Town's locked down. Come back in 2 days and we'll see where things stand. Elias Vorn was with them, his face haggard from grief and sleeplessness. We need food, Marshal. Medicine. Our supplies are running low. Then you should have thought of that before your hired guns started burning buildings. Cole's voice was hard. I don't care who started the fires, Vorn. What I care about is stopping them from spreading. Go home. Protect your families. Let me try to fix this. There's nothing to fix. This is war now. You said it yourself at the fence. I said a lot of things at the fence while people were dying. Doesn't mean I believe them. Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me. Hale's planning something big. I can feel it. He's not going to let those fires go unanswered. You go back to your claims, you fortify your positions, and you prepare for the worst. But you don't attack first. You understand me? You strike now, and everything that happens after is on you. Vorn's jaw worked, anger and fear warring across his face. Finally, he nodded. We'll defend what's ours. Nothing more. That's all I'm asking. After they left, Ben appeared at Cole's side. The merchants are complaining. Without business, they're losing money every hour. They'll lose more than money if this town erupts. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead. The day was hot, the smoke making the air thick and hard to breathe. How are the patrols holding up? Good so far, but we're stretched thin. If Hale decides to push, we won't be able to stop him. Then we make sure he doesn't decide to push. Cole's plan crystallized as he walked back to the office. He couldn't stop a war through force. Hale had too many men, too many resources. But he could remove the battlefield. If Abilene itself became untenable as a target, if there was nothing worth fighting over, maybe both sides would back down long enough to negotiate. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation was all he had left. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and blood, Cole did something unprecedented. He ordered every merchant to close their businesses and secure their buildings. He posted guards at the bank, the land office, the railroad depot, every place that represented value or authority. Then he had Ben spread the word that anyone still in town after nightfall would be considered a threat and treated accordingly. Abilene transformed into a ghost town as citizens fled to their homes and locked their doors. The streets, usually alive with noise and commerce even after dark, fell silent. Only Cole's patrols moved through the shadows, grim sentinels watching for the violence everyone knew was coming. Cole positioned himself in the center of Main Street, standing alone in the pool of light from a street lamp, waiting. If Hale wanted to make his move, this was when it would happen. Under cover of darkness, when fear was strongest and courage weakest. The attack came 2 hours after sunset. They appeared at the north end of town, a column of riders moving fast and quiet, torches carried but not yet lit. Cole counted at least 40 men, maybe more. Hale rode at their head, a dark figure on his black horse, looking like death itself. Cole drew his Colt and fired once into the air. The column stopped, horses dancing nervously at the sudden noise. Cole walked forward, alone, his gun held loosely at his side. "That's far enough, Hale." The rancher dismounted, gesturing for his men to hold position. He walked forward until he and Cole stood facing each other in the middle of the street, two men whose choices had brought them to this moment. "You've made a mistake, Marshal," Hale said quietly, "closing the town, declaring martial law. You've overplayed your hand. I've done what's necessary to prevent more bloodshed. Those fires today? They were just the beginning. You ride in here with torches, and Abilene burns to the ground. Is that what you want? To destroy the very town you claim to have built? I built it to serve my interests. If it can't do that anymore, it has no value." Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. You'd really burn it all down? Kill innocent people? Destroy businesses? Ruin lives? All because some farmers wanted to claim land that was never really yours. "I'd do whatever it takes to protect what I've built." Hale's eyes were hard in the lamplight. "You think you're the only one who believes in something, Marshal? I believe in empire, in power, in the right of strong men to shape the world according to their vision. The frontier doesn't belong to whoever files the right papers in some government office. It belongs to whoever has the strength to hold it. Then we're at an impasse, because I believe the law is stronger than any one man's strength, and I'll die proving it if I have to." Hale studied him for a long moment. "You're a rare man, Maddox. I respect that, even as I prepare to destroy you. But respect won't save you. Nothing can save you now." He turned to walk back to his horse, and Cole made his play. "You ride into this town, and every business burns. Not because of your men, because of me. I've had my deputies rig every major building with oil and tinder. You try to take Abilene by force, and there won't be an Abilene left to take. Just ashes and ruins." Hale stopped, turned back slowly. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You willing to bet your entire economic base on that assumption? Because once those buildings burn, the cattle drives will bypass this town forever. The railroad will abandon the depot. Everything you've built here will be gone, and you'll have nothing to show for it but a memorial to your pride." For the first time since Cole had met him, Hale looked uncertain. "You'd burn your own town to stop me?" "I'd burn anything to stop a war that'll kill innocent people. That's the difference between us, Hale. You see Abilene as a tool. I see it as people worth protecting. The rancher's hand moved toward his gun, and instantly Cole heard the sound of rifles being cocked. His deputies had taken positions on the rooftops, in windows, behind cover. Every one of Hale's men was in someone's sights. You move another inch, Cole said softly, and this becomes a bloodbath. Maybe you win. Maybe your 40 guns beat my 12. But you'll lose men, Hale. Good men who trust you to lead them to victory, not to a massacre. And for what? A burned town and a hollow triumph? The moment stretched out, taut as a bowstring. Cole could see the calculation in Hale's eyes, the weighing of options and outcomes. Around them, the night held its breath. Finally, Hale's hand dropped. What do you want? I want you and Vorn in the same room. Tomorrow, noon, at the courthouse. No weapons, no men, just the two of you and a mediator. You talk. You negotiate. You find a way to coexist that doesn't involve burning and killing. And if we can't reach an agreement, then we're right back here tomorrow night, and you can try your luck against my torches. But at least we'll have tried peace first. Hale was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Noon tomorrow. But Marshal, if this is a trap, if you're using this as a chance to arrest me, it's not a trap. It's the last chance for this town to survive. For all of us to survive. The rancher mounted his horse. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the biggest fool. I haven't decided which yet. Ask me again after tomorrow, Cole said. Hale and his men rode away, their unlit torches a testament to a battle delayed if not prevented. Cole waited until they disappeared into the darkness before allowing himself to breathe. Ben appeared from the shadows, his face pale. Boss, we didn't actually rig the buildings with tinder. That was a bluff. I know. What if he'd called it? What if he'd charged anyway? Cole looked at his deputy, at the young man who still believed badges and laws could change the world. Then we would have fought and probably died. But at least we would have tried something other than killing first. The night passed without further incident, but Cole didn't sleep. He sat in his office, planning for tomorrow's meeting, trying to think of every possible argument that might convince two stubborn men to set aside their hatred long enough to find common ground. It was a fool's errand, and he knew it. Men like Hale and Vorn didn't compromise. They conquered or died trying. But the alternative was a bloodbath that would consume Abilene and everyone in it. Dawn came gray and uncertain, clouds building on the horizon promising rain that wouldn't fall. Cole cleaned his gun, checked his ammunition, and tried not to think about all the ways the day could go wrong. Around 10 in the morning, a rider came from the homesteader camps with Vorn's response. The farmer would attend the meeting, but only if Cole guaranteed his safety, and only if the discussion was witnessed by neutral parties. Cole agreed to both conditions and sent word to Judge Morrison and Dr. Hendricks to serve as witnesses. At 11:30, he walked to the courthouse, Ben beside him, feeling like a man walking to his own execution. The courthouse was a simple two-story building that served as courtroom, land office, and meeting hall. Cole had cleared the main room of everything except a table and 6 chairs. No decorations, no distractions, just a space where hard truths could be spoken. Hale arrived first, precisely at noon, flanked by Luther Grimes and 2 other men. Cole stopped them at the door. Just you, like we agreed. Grimes bristled. Mr. Hale doesn't go anywhere without protection. Today he does. Or, there's no meeting. Cole's voice was iron. Your choice. Hale placed a hand on his foreman's shoulder. It's fine, Luther. Wait outside. He unbuckled his gun belt and handed it over, meeting Cole's eyes with a look that promised retribution if this went wrong. Vorn arrived 5 minutes later with 2 of his own men and the same reluctance to enter unarmed. Cole repeated his conditions, and eventually the farmer complied, though his face showed how much trust it cost him. Judge Morrison and Dr. Hendricks were already seated, looking nervous but determined. Cole took his position at the head of the table, placing himself between Hale and Vorn like a physical barrier. Gentlemen, he began, his voice formal, we're here because the alternative is mutual destruction. The territory is changing, whether we like it or not. The open range is closing. The homesteaders are coming, backed by federal law. The question isn't whether that change happens. It's whether it happens through negotiation or through blood. Hale leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. Marshal, I appreciate the sentiment, but some changes can't be negotiated. My cattle need grazing land and access to water. The drives need clear trails to market. These homesteaders want to fence off everything and turn it into farmland. Those positions are incompatible. They don't have to be, Vorn countered. We're not trying to shut down the cattle industry. We're trying to build homes and communities. There's room for both if people are willing to share. Share. Hale's laugh was bitter. I've been working this land for 12 years. I've invested everything I have in building an empire, and now I'm supposed to share it with people who showed up 3 months ago with government papers and big dreams? Those government papers represent the future, Vorn shot back. The Homestead Act is the law. The frontier can't stay wild forever. Civilization is coming, and men like you need to accept that. Civilization. Hale's voice dripped contempt. Is that what you call burning down businesses in the middle of the night? That's your civilization? Vorn's face flushed. Our hired guns acted without authorization. But let's talk about burning, shall we? Who torched the Morgenstern homestead? Who drove cattle through a legal fence and killed innocent women and children? Cole slammed his hand on the table. Stop, both of you. We're not here to relitigate grievances. We're here to find a path forward. There is no path forward, Hale said flatly. Not one that accommodates both our interests. Then make one, Cole said, because the alternative is that I let you two fight it out until one side is destroyed, and then I arrest whoever's left standing for murder. Is that what you want? To win a war and spend the rest of your life in prison? Silence fell over the room. Morrison cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps, the judge ventured, we could discuss specific accommodations, water rights, trail accesses, grazing schedules, the details that might allow coexistence. The detail that matters, Hale said, is that I need 300,000 acres of range to run my operation. These homesteaders want to claim that same land in 160-acre parcels. The math doesn't work. Vorn leaned forward. What if we agreed to leave certain corridors open, designated trails that your cattle could use to reach market? We wouldn't fence those areas, and you'd respect the boundaries of our claims. And water rights? Shared access to the creeks and springs, scheduled usage to prevent overgrazing. Hale considered this, his face unreadable. And what about your hired guns? The men who burned my town? What about your men who burned our homes? Vorn countered. Cole held up his hand before the argument could reignite. Here's what's going to happen. Both sides surrender the men directly responsible for the arsons. They stand trial, and whatever the verdict, both sides accept it. That gives everyone justice and removes the most volatile elements from your respective camps. My men were following orders, Hale said. Then you stand trial too, Cole replied. That's the price of leadership. You give the orders, you face the consequences. The rancher's eyes narrowed. You think I'll agree to that? I think you're smart enough to see it's better than the alternative. You stand trial, maybe you're convicted, maybe you're not. But either way, it ends the cycle. No more revenge killings, no more escalation, just law and consequences. Hendricks spoke for the first time. Gentlemen, I've treated wounded men from both sides. I've seen the cost of this conflict in blood and broken bones. As someone who takes no side in your disputes, I can tell you that neither of you can win a war. You can only lose at different speeds. The doctor's words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Vorn was the first to break the silence. I didn't come here to fight. I came to build a life for my family. If there's a way to do that without more bloodshed, I'll take it. But I won't surrender my legal rights, and I won't be driven off land I've claimed fairly. Hale studied the farmer for a long moment. If I agree to this, designated trails, shared water rights, trials for the men involved in the fires, what guarantee do I have that more homesteaders won't keep coming, fencing off more land until there's nothing left? No guarantee, Cole said honestly. The frontier is closing, Hale. That's reality. But what you can get is time to adapt, to transition your operation to work within the new constraints. Fight this change, and you'll be swept away. Work with it, and you might survive. The rancher stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Abilene lay quiet under the gray sky, waiting for the decision that would determine its fate. I built this town, Hale said quietly, his back to the room. I brought the first cattle through here when it was nothing but prairie and wind. I've buried friends in that cemetery, men who died building something from nothing. And now you're asking me to accept that it's all changing, that the world I created is dying. I'm asking you to accept that it's evolving, Cole said. From wild to settled, from chaos to order. That's not death, it's transformation. Hale turned back, and Cole was startled to see something that might have been grief in the man's eyes. You're asking me to accept that I've become obsolete, that men like me, who carved empires from wilderness, are no longer needed. I'm asking you to become something different, a rancher who works within boundaries instead of ruling without them. It's not obsolete. It's adaptation. The rancher looked at Vorn, really looked at him for the first time, seeing perhaps not an enemy, but a mirror of his own younger self. Someone who'd come to an empty land with dreams and determination, willing to fight for a future. If we do this, Hale said slowly, if we agree to your terms, I want something in writing, a formal agreement that defines the trail corridors, the water access, everything, signed by representatives of both sides and witnessed by territorial authority. Judge Morrison can draft it, Cole said. We'll have it ready by tomorrow. Vorn stood as well. And the trials for the arsonists? That includes your man Carver? It includes whoever the evidence points to, Cole said. No favorites, no exceptions. Justice applies equally, or it doesn't apply at all. The farmer extended his hand across the table. Then we have an agreement. Hale looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Cole could see the struggle playing out across his face. Pride warring with pragmatism, the desire to fight warring with the wisdom to survive. Finally, the rancher stepped forward and clasped Vorn's hand. We have an agreement, Hale said. But understand this. If your people violate the terms, if they try to expand beyond what we're establishing here, I will respond with every resource at my disposal. And if your men harass my families or damage our property, we'll defend ourselves with the same determination, Vorn replied. Then we understand each other. They released hands and stepped back, and Cole felt something release in his chest that he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the absence of immediate war, and in the current circumstances, that was victory enough. Morrison began drafting the agreement while Hendricks offered to bring coffee. Cole walked outside, needing air, needing space to process what had just happened. Ben was waiting on the courthouse steps, his face anxious. How'd it go? We bought time, Cole said. Maybe enough to make a difference. And if one side breaks the agreement, then we're right back where we started. But at least we tried something other than killing each other first. The agreement was finalized by evening, a detailed document that defined trail corridors, established water-sharing protocols, and set boundaries for expansion. Both Hale and Vorn signed it, with Morrison and Hendricks as witnesses. Cole added his own signature as enforcing authority, knowing he was binding himself to ensure compliance. Word spread through Abilene like wildfire. The saloons reopened, and this time the celebration was genuine, not drunken bravado, but real relief. People who'd been preparing for war could suddenly imagine surviving another season, but Cole knew better than to relax. Peace agreements on paper didn't change the hearts of men. The hard work would come in the days and weeks ahead, ensuring compliance, mediating disputes, preventing the small conflicts from escalating into large ones. He was walking back to his office, exhausted but satisfied, when he saw Luther Grimes waiting in the shadows. The foreman stepped into the light, his bandaged hand tucked against his chest. You think you've won something, Marshal? You think your fancy agreement changes anything? It changes whether people die tomorrow, Cole said. That's enough for now. Mr. Hale signed that paper because you backed him into a corner, but corners don't last forever. Eventually, there's room to move again. And when there is, we'll deal with whatever comes, Cole interrupted. But if you're thinking about undermining this agreement, about sabotaging the peace, understand that I'll be watching, and anything that happens will trace back to whoever ordered it. Grimes smiled coldly. Threats, Marshal? I thought we were all friends now. We're not friends. We're people choosing not to kill each other today. There's a difference. The foreman walked away, and Cole felt the weight of what he'd accomplished settle over him. The agreement was fragile, held together by mutual fear and exhaustion. But it was something, a foundation that might, with care and vigilance, grow into actual peace. Or it might crumble at the first test, sending everyone spiraling back into violence. Only time would tell which future Abilene would choose. The test came sooner than Cole expected. 3 days after the agreement was signed, one of Hale's cattle wandered onto a homesteader's wheat field and trampled half an acre before anyone noticed. The homesteader, a young man named Thomas Beck, shot the animal and left its carcass at the edge of Hale's designated corridor with a note that read simply, "Keep your cattle on your side." Cole heard about it from Ben, who'd ridden out at dawn to investigate reports of gunfire. The deputy returned just after breakfast, his face grim. "It's gonna blow up, boss. Hale's men are saying it's a violation of the agreement. The homesteaders are saying they have a right to protect their crops. Both sides are arming up." Cole grabbed his hat and gun belt. "Where's the carcass now?" "Still there. Neither side will touch it. It's like they're waiting to see what you'll do." What Cole did was ride out alone, leaving Ben to maintain order in town. The morning was crisp, autumn starting to paint the prairie in shades of gold and amber. In a few months, winter would arrive and test the agreement in ways summer never could. But first, they had to survive the small conflicts that could unravel everything. The cattle carcass lay exactly where Beck had left it, a testament to stubbornness on both sides. A group of Hale's cowboys stood on one side of the boundary line, while homesteaders gathered on the other. The two groups faced each other across maybe 30 yards of empty ground, and Cole could feel the tension crackling like electricity before a storm. He dismounted between them. "All right, everybody settle down. Beck, you shot this animal?" The young homesteader stepped forward, his rifle held across his chest. "I did, Marshal. It was destroying my wheat. I got a right to protect my property." "You got a right to drive it off," Cole corrected. "Not to kill it. That cow was worth $40, maybe more. You just cost Mr. Hale money." "It cost me half my crop." Beck's face flushed. "That wheat was going to feed my family through winter. What am I supposed to do, just let his cattle eat everything I worked for?" One of Hale's men, a cowboy named Daniels, spoke up. "The agreement says we got access to the trails and water. Cattle wander. That's their nature. You can't shoot them every time they step on your precious dirt." "The agreement says you keep your animals in the designated corridors," Cole said. "How'd this cow get onto Beck's land?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Fence must have come down somewhere. We'll fix it." "You'll do more than fix it. You'll pay Beck for the damaged crops. Fair market value, assessed by an independent party." "Like hell we will," another cowboy growled. "That Nestor shot our property. He owes us for the cow." Cole turned to face the cowboy, his voice dropping to the cold tone that made smart men reconsider their positions. "The cow wandered onto land it had no business being on. Beck had a right to protect his crops. He used excessive force, true, but that doesn't erase your side's responsibility for the initial violation. So what, we just eat the loss? No. Here's what happens. Hale's outfit pays Beck for the crop damage. Beck pays Hale for the cow. We call it even, and both sides learn that violating the agreement has consequences." Cole looked at both groups. "Unless someone wants to argue that the agreement doesn't matter anymore, in which case, we can tear it up right now and go back to killing each other." Silence settled over the gathered men. Cole could see them processing the choice, weighing pride against pragmatism. Finally, Daniels nodded. "I'll take it to Mr. Hale, but he's not going to like it." "He doesn't have to like it. He just has to honor the agreement he signed." The cowboys left, and Cole turned to the homesteaders. Beck was staring at his ruined wheat field, his shoulders slumped. "I can't afford to pay for that cow, Marshal. I barely have enough to buy seed for next year." "You'll work it out with Hale. Maybe pay it off in labor, help with the harvest. The point isn't the money, it's establishing that both sides face consequences when they break the rules. Feels like we're the ones getting punished for defending ourselves." Cole understood the sentiment. Justice often felt unfair to the people receiving it. You are being punished, but so are they. That's what equality looks like. Nobody gets special treatment, nobody gets a free pass. He left Beck to survey his damage and rode back toward town, already thinking about the next crisis, the next test. The agreement was holding, but just barely. It would take months, maybe years, before the new boundaries became accepted, before people stopped testing the limits, if they ever stopped at all. Abilene had begun to change in the days following the courthouse meeting. The transformation was subtle at first, cowboys and homesteaders giving each other wider berths on the street, merchants learning to serve both groups without showing preference, the gradual acceptance that two worlds could coexist if people worked at it. But change also brought resistance. Cole was reviewing case files in his office when Mayor Webb arrived with Judge Morrison, both men wearing expressions of bureaucratic concern that Cole had learned to dread. "Marshal," Webb began, settling into a chair without invitation, "we've received word from Topeka. The governor has reviewed Carson Reed's report." Cole set down the file he'd been reading. "And?" Morrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed's assessment was mixed. He acknowledged that you managed to broker a peace agreement, which reflects well on your negotiating skills. However, he also documented your declaration of martial law, the closure of businesses without council approval, and what he termed threats of arson against private property." "I stopped a war," Cole said flatly. "If that required some creative interpretation of my authority, I'll stand by those decisions." "The governor is less understanding," Webb said. "He's concerned about the precedent of marshals operating outside legal constraints. He's recommended that the territorial legislature review your actions and determine whether censure is appropriate." Cole leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Censure. So I save this town from burning down, broker peace between two armed camps, and establish a framework for coexistence, and my reward is political punishment." "It's not personal, Marshal," Morrison said. "It's about maintaining proper governmental procedures. You exceeded your authority. I did my job. Everything else was just details." Webb sighed. "Regardless of your intentions, there will be consequences. The territorial legislature meets in 6 weeks. You'll likely be called to testify." "Fine. I'll tell them exactly what I told Reed. I enforced the law, protected citizens, and used every tool available to prevent bloodshed. If that's not what they want from their lawmen, they should make it clear in the job description." After they left, Ben appeared in the doorway. "Heard that last bit. You really going to fight this?" "What choice do I have? Back down, and every marshal in the territory learns that doing the hard right thing gets you punished. Better to fight and lose than surrender without trying. What if they strip your badge?" Cole had considered that possibility often in the past few days. "Then I'll have done everything I could with the authority I had. That'll have to be enough." But even as he said it, Cole knew the deeper truth. He'd chosen principle over pragmatism, and that choice always carried a price. The question was whether Abilene would survive long enough for his sacrifice to matter. The trials for the arsonist began 2 weeks later, Judge Morrison presiding over proceedings that drew spectators from across the territory. The courthouse was packed, with overflow crowds gathering outside to hear secondhand accounts of the testimony. Carver went first, Hale's man who'd confessed during his fever to burning the Morgenstern homestead. With Dr. Hendricks testifying about the confession and physical evidence linking Carver to the scene, the verdict was never in doubt. Guilty on all counts, 5 years in territorial prison. Hale sat through the entire trial, his face carved from stone, saying nothing as his man was led away in chains. But his eyes found Cole's across the courtroom, and the message was clear: this isn't over. The homesteaders' hired guns came next, 3 men charged with burning the general store and dry goods shop. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Witnesses who'd seen them near the fires, oil-stained clothes, no alibis for the critical hours. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with guilty verdicts for 2 of the 3. 7 years each. Vorn attended every day of testimony, sitting quietly in the back row, his face reflecting the complex emotions of a man watching justice served at great cost. When the verdicts were read, he approached Cole outside the courthouse. "Thank you, Marshal, for making sure the law applied equally." "Don't thank me yet," Cole said. "Those men going to prison doesn't erase what happened, doesn't bring back the dead or rebuild what burned. It's just consequences, not closure. Sometimes consequences are all we can ask for." Cole watched the farmer walk away and wondered if that was true. If consequences alone could build a lasting peace, or if they just bought time until the next crisis erupted. The answer came faster than he wanted. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping down from the north with bitter winds and snow that turned the prairie into a white wasteland. The cattle drives stopped, the trails became impassable, and Abilene settled into the quiet rhythm of a town waiting for spring. But quiet didn't mean peaceful. The agreement's water-sharing provisions became a flashpoint when the creek froze over and both sides needed access to the few remaining open springs. Fights broke out over whose cattle got priority, whose homestead had rights to the closest water source. Cole spent weeks mediating disputes, establishing schedules, threatening arrests when tempers flared too hot. Then came the incident that nearly destroyed everything they'd built. A homesteader named Marcus Whitley was found dead on the trail between town and his claim, shot twice in the back. His horse was missing, his saddlebags rifled through. It looked like robbery, but robbery didn't explain why Whitley's body had been moved after death, positioned to make it appear he'd been shot while fleeing. Cole investigated with Ben, examining the scene with the methodical precision of men who knew one wrong conclusion could reignite the war. "Blood trail suggests he was shot here," Ben said, pointing to stains in the snow. "But the body was found 30 yards that way. Someone moved him. Someone trying to send a message or someone trying to cover their tracks? Both, maybe. Make it look like he ran, like he had something to hide." Cole studied the bullet wounds, the angle of entry, the lack of defensive injuries. He was ambushed, didn't see it coming, didn't have time to fight back. Professional work, not a random killing. They followed the evidence for 3 days, interviewing witnesses, tracking movements, piecing together Whitley's last hours. The trail led to a surprising conclusion. The killer wasn't one of Hale's men or a homesteader seeking revenge. It was one of the hired guns who'd been acquitted in the arson trial. His name was Crenshaw, a cold-eyed man who'd been hanging around Abilene after his trial, drinking too much and making too many threats. Whitley had testified against him during the proceedings, providing the alibi that had saved one suspect but implicated the others. Crenshaw had wanted payback. Cole found him in a line shack north of town, drunk and defiant. "Whitley was a liar," Crenshaw slurred. "Said he saw me by the fire when he couldn't have. Cost my friend 7 years in prison." "So you shot him in the back like a coward," Cole said, his gun trained on the man. "I gave him justice, same as what they gave my friends. What you gave him was murder, and what I'm giving you is a choice. Come peacefully, face trial, or make me kill you right here." Crenshaw reached for his gun, and Cole shot him in the shoulder before he could clear leather. The hired gun went down screaming, and Cole disarmed him with cold efficiency. "Wrong choice," Cole said, applying a makeshift bandage to stop the bleeding. "But at least you'll live long enough to hang." The trial was swift and decisive. Crenshaw confessed, perhaps hoping for mercy, perhaps just tired of running. The jury took 20 minutes to convict. Judge Morrison sentenced him to hang, and the execution was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Cole expected the homesteaders to celebrate. One of their own had been avenged, justice served. Instead, Vaughan came to the office looking troubled. "I appreciate what you did, Marshal, catching Whitley's killer, but hanging Crenshaw won't bring Marcus back. His wife is pregnant, his children are orphans now. More death doesn't balance the scales." "The law says murder deserves the ultimate punishment," Cole replied. "I don't make those rules, I just enforce them. And if enforcing them creates more widows and orphans, when does the cycle end?" Cole had no answer that would satisfy the farmer. The law was meant to be absolute, unchanging, a foundation that couldn't shift with emotions or circumstances. But sitting across from Vaughan, seeing the genuine anguish in the man's face, Cole wondered if absolute justice was just another form of violence. The hanging took place on a gray morning in late November, with half the town watching in silence. Crenshaw went to the gallows cursing everyone: Cole, the homesteaders, the jury, the whole territory. When the trap dropped and the rope snapped taut, the sound echoed across Abilene like a final punctuation mark on the summer's violence. Cole watched without expression, but inside he felt hollow. Justice had been served, but Vaughan was right. It didn't feel like victory, just another necessary cruelty in a world full of them. After the hanging, he walked alone through Abilene's streets, seeing with fresh eyes the changes that had taken root. The burnt buildings were being rebuilt, merchants and homesteaders working together on construction crews. The saloons stayed open but quieter, as if everyone had lost their taste for drunken celebration. Children played in the streets without fear, their laughter a sound Cole had almost forgotten. The town was healing, slowly and imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. He found Hale outside the bank, conducting business as if the past months had never happened. The rancher looked up as Cole approached, his expression neutral. Marshal, congratulations on closing the Whitley case. Doing my job. Your job has gotten considerably more complicated since you arrived. Hale gestured at the street. But I suppose the results speak for themselves. Abilene is still standing. So is your cattle operation. Barely. I lost 20% of my herd to the winter already. The agreement's water-sharing provisions favor the homesteaders. They're closer to the springs. My animals are walking twice as far for half the water. Cole could hear the complaint forming and cut it off. The agreement was designed to be fair, not comfortable. If you're losing cattle, adjust your operation. Sell some, consolidate the herd, adapt to the new reality. Hale smiled without humor. You sound like a rancher, Marshal. Maybe you missed your calling. My calling is keeping the peace. Everything else is just conversation. Then let me have a conversation with you about the future. Hale's tone shifted, becoming more serious. The territorial legislature is going to censure you, probably suspend you, might even strip your badge permanently. When that happens, Abilene will need new law enforcement. I'd like to recommend Luther Grimes for the position. Cole felt ice settle in his stomach. Grimes is your foreman. Installing him as marshal would give you control of the town's legal authority. It would ensure stability. A man who understands both sides, who has the respect of the cattle interests and the pragmatism to work with the homesteaders. Grimes has the loyalty of an employee to his employer. He'd enforce the law however you directed, which means the law would serve your interests exclusively. Hale shrugged. Someone will replace you, Marshal. It might as well be someone who can actually keep this fragile peace from collapsing the moment you're gone. He walked away, leaving Cole to contemplate a future where everything he'd built crumbled under the weight of politics and power. That evening, Cole called a meeting of everyone who'd been part of the summer's conflicts. It took some convincing, but eventually they gathered in the courthouse. Hale and his key men on one side, Vorn and the homesteader representatives on the other, with the town council and various merchants filling the middle ground. Cole stood before them feeling every one of his 42 years. I asked you all here because we need to talk about what happens next. You've probably heard that I'm facing censure from the territorial legislature. They might suspend me, might remove me from office. When that happens, this town will need to decide who fills the vacuum. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cole raised his hand for silence. I know some of you think my replacement should come from the cattle interests. Others think it should be someone sympathetic to the homesteaders. But here's the truth. If Abilene's law enforcement becomes an extension of either side, the peace we've built will collapse. It has to be someone neutral, someone committed to enforcing the agreement we all signed regardless of personal preference. Ben stood from where he'd been sitting along the wall. I nominate myself. The room erupted in conversation. Ben was young, barely 25, with limited experience beyond serving as Cole's deputy. But he'd been there for every conflict, every mediation, every hard choice. He knew the players and the issues better than any outsider could. Hale stood. With all respect to Deputy Ridley, this position requires someone with more gravitas, more experience. Luther Grimes has 15 years of managing men and resolving disputes. Managing men who work for you, Vorn countered. We need someone independent. Then bring in a federal marshal, one of the merchants suggested. Someone with no ties to either side. Federal marshals are spread thin, Cole said. It could take months to assign someone, and in the meantime, who keeps order? The debate raged for 2 hours, every faction pushing for their preferred candidate, every suggestion meeting resistance from someone else. Cole let it play out, understanding that they needed to exhaust the obvious options before accepting the uncomfortable truth. Finally, Dr. Hendricks stood. The room quieted. The doctor was respected by everyone, seen as genuinely neutral. I propose we let the people decide, Hendricks said. An election. Not just the council voting in closed session, but an actual vote where every citizen of Abilene gets a say. Property owners, business owners, residents who've been here longer than 6 months. Let democracy determine who enforces the law. The suggestion hung in the air, radical and reasonable in equal measure. Frontier towns rarely held elections for law enforcement. Positions were appointed by councils or territorial governors. But Abilene had never been a typical frontier town. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. I can draft the necessary documents, establish voting procedures. We could hold the election in 2 weeks, give candidates time to make their cases. And if the people elect someone incompetent, Hale challenged, if they choose popularity over capability, then they live with the consequences, Cole said. Same as they'd live with the consequences of having law enforcement imposed from above. At least this way, everyone has a voice. The vote to approve the election was close, 12 in favor, 9 against, with several abstentions. But it passed. And suddenly Abilene was facing something unprecedented, a democratic choice about its own future. The campaign that followed was unlike anything the town had seen. Ben threw his hat in the ring officially, as did Luther Grimes. A third candidate emerged, James Weatherby's son Thomas, fresh from law school back east, arguing that professional legal training trumped either practical experience or political connections. They held debates in the town square, each candidate presenting their vision for Abilene's future. Ben argued for continuity, for maintaining the approach Cole had established. Grimes promised efficiency and business-friendly enforcement. Thomas Weatherby spoke of modernization and legal reform. Cole stayed out of it officially, but privately he counseled Ben on strategy and substance. "Don't try to be me," he told his former deputy. "People don't need another Cole Maddox. They need someone who understands what we've built and why it matters. Talk about the agreement, about equal enforcement, about keeping both sides honest. What if I lose?" "Then you lose having fought for something worth fighting for." That's more than most people can say. Election day arrived on a cold December morning. The turnout surprised everyone. Nearly every eligible voter showed up, standing in line outside the courthouse to cast their ballots. Cowboys and homesteaders, merchants and laborers, people who rarely agreed on anything unified by the simple act of choosing their future. The votes were counted publicly, with representatives from each faction watching to ensure fairness. As the numbers climbed, patterns emerged. Ben had strong support among the homesteaders and townspeople who valued his connection to Cole's approach. Grimes commanded the cattle interests and merchants worried about economic stability. Thomas Weatherby pulled votes from the educated class and newcomers who wanted professional governance. When the final tally was announced, Ben had won by 7 votes. 7 votes out of nearly 200 cast. The narrowest of margins, but enough. Cole watched from the back of the courthouse as Judge Morrison administered the oath of office, as Ben swore to uphold the law and serve all citizens equally. The young man who'd been a nervous deputy just months ago now wore the Marshal's badge with a steadiness that suggested he understood the weight of what he'd accepted. After the ceremony, Ben found Cole outside. "I can't do this without you," he said. "Stay on as my deputy. Help me navigate the politics and the conflicts. I'll be the face, but I need your experience." Cole had thought about this moment, about what he'd do when his time as Marshal ended. Part of him wanted to ride away, to find some quieter town where the conflicts were simpler and the stakes lower. But looking at Ben, at the hope and determination in his young face, Cole realized his work in Abilene wasn't finished. "All right," he said, "but just until spring. Give you time to find your footing, then I'm moving on." Ben's relief was visible. "Deal. Now what do we do about the territorial legislature? They're still going to want answers about your methods. Let them come. I'll give them answers and they can do whatever they want with them, but I'm not apologizing for saving this town." The legislative hearing took place in Topeka in mid-January, with Cole testifying before a committee of politicians who'd never seen frontier violence firsthand. They questioned him for 6 hours about the martial law declaration, the threat to burn the town, the closure of businesses without authorization. Cole answered every question honestly, explaining the context, the choices he'd faced, the outcomes he'd achieved. When they asked if he'd do anything differently, he said no. "The law is supposed to serve the people," he told them, "not the other way around. I used every tool available to prevent bloodshed and establish lasting peace. If that violated technical procedures, I'll accept whatever consequences you impose. But I won't pretend I was wrong to prioritize lives over paperwork." The committee deliberated for 3 days before issuing their decision. They censured Cole for exceeding his authority, but acknowledged that his actions had prevented a larger tragedy. No suspension, no criminal charges, just an official reprimand that would sit in his permanent record. "They went easy on you," Ben said when Cole returned to Abilene. "Probably because the alternative would have been admitting the territory doesn't give marshals adequate tools to handle complex situations. or because they recognized that sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to save something worth saving. Cole hung his coat on the peg in the office, noting how comfortable the space still felt despite no longer being his domain. Either way, it's done. We can focus on the future instead of relitigating the past. The future came faster than anyone expected. In early February, word arrived that the railroad was planning to extend its line north, bypassing Abilene entirely in favor of a route that would better serve the growing agricultural interests. The cattle drives would find new shipping points, and Abilene would lose its primary economic engine. The news sent shockwaves through the town. Merchants panicked, property values plummeted, and the old divisions threatened to resurface as everyone looked for someone to blame. But something unexpected happened. Instead of fracturing, Abilene adapted. The homesteaders, now established and producing crops, needed a central market to sell their goods. The merchants, facing the loss of cattle drive revenue, needed new customers. And Hale, watching his empire shift under the weight of changing economics, recognized that diversification was survival. Over the course of that spring, Abilene transformed. The saloons became meeting halls and dance venues. The cattle pens were converted to grain storage. Buildings that had housed gambling dens became schools and workshops. The town that had lived on chaos and violence learned to thrive on cooperation and commerce. Cole watched it all from his position as deputy, marveling at humanity's capacity for adaptation. The people who'd been at each other's throats just months ago were now working together, building something that would outlast the frontier era that had created them. Hale sold off half his cattle operation and invested in a grain elevator, partnering with homesteader cooperatives to ship wheat and corn to eastern markets. It wasn't the empire he'd envisioned, but it was sustainable, profitable, and didn't require violence to maintain. Vaughn's settlement grew to 50 families, with a school, a shared well system, and formal incorporation as a township separate from but connected to Abilene. The hatred that had driven him to string that barbed wire fence had mellowed into pragmatic coexistence. And Abilene itself became something new, not a wide-open cattle town or an agricultural community, but a hybrid that borrowed from both, creating an identity that belonged uniquely to the people who'd fought and bled to establish it. In late March, as winter released its grip and the prairie began to green again, Cole packed his belongings into his saddlebags. He'd stayed longer than planned, helping Ben navigate the transition, but the time had come to move on. Ben found him saddling his horse in the livery stable. "You really leaving?" "Told you I would. Spring's here, you've got your feet under you, and this town doesn't need me anymore." "That's not true. People respect you, trust you." "They trust the badge, Ben, and you're wearing it now." Cole tightened the cinch and ran his hand along the gray's neck. "Besides, I'm not built for peace. I'm a man who solves problems through force when necessary. Abilene's moving past that. It needs someone who can build, not just protect." "Where will you go?" "Wherever the next telegram takes me. There's always another town falling apart, always another Marshal who needs backup or replacement." Cole swung into the saddle. "But I'll remember this place. Remember what we built here." He rode down Main Street one last time, noting the changes that had taken root in his absence from active duty. New construction everywhere, fresh paint on old buildings, signs advertising cooperatives and partnerships that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. At the edge of town, he found an unexpected gathering. Hale sat on his black stallion, Vaughan stood beside a wagon, and a crowd of townspeople had assembled to see him off. Hale rode forward. "Marshal Maddox, or should I say deputy?" "Just Cole now. The badge stays with Ben." "Then just Cole. I wanted to thank you for saving my life's work, even when I was too stubborn to see it needed saving." He extended his hand and Cole shook it, feeling the genuine gratitude beneath the rancher's pride. Vaughan approached next. "My daughter asked me to give you this." He handed up a small leather bookmark, hand-stitched with simple words. "Justice is what we make together." Cole tucked it into his coat pocket. "Tell her I said thanks, and tell her to remember that when things get hard again. Because they will." "We'll be ready," Vaughan said. "You showed us how." Dutch Kearney stepped forward with a bottle. "Something for the road. The good stuff, not what I serve the cowboys." Dr. Hendricks added a medical kit. "Because men like you always end up bleeding somewhere. One by one, they came forward, merchants and farmers, cowboys and townspeople, everyone who'd been part of Abilene's transformation, offering small tokens of appreciation and farewell. Ben was the last, his eyes bright with emotion he was trying to hide. "I learned everything from you." "No," Cole said gently. "You learned how to be me. Now you have to learn how to be yourself. That's the harder lesson, but the more important one." He turned his horse north, toward wherever the frontier still needed someone willing to stand between order and chaos. Behind him, Abilene settled into its new identity, the wounds of summer slowly healing into scars that would remind future generations of the price of peace. Cole didn't look back. He'd learned long ago that nostalgia was a luxury lawmen couldn't afford. The past was fixed, unchangeable, a story already written. The future was what mattered, and somewhere ahead, another town was falling apart. Another Marshal was facing odds he couldn't beat alone. The gray carried him across the prairie, through grass that bent in waves under the spring wind. By evening, Abilene was just a smudge on the horizon behind him, and by morning it would be gone entirely, existing only in memory and the leather bookmark tucked against his heart. But what they'd built there would last. Not perfectly, not without continued struggle and compromise, but it would last. A town that had learned to choose conversation over violence, negotiation over domination, future over past. That was victory enough for any man. The sun set ahead of him, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, and Cole Maddox rode toward it, ready for whatever came next. Because there would always be something next. Another crisis, another conflict, another chance to prove that law and order could triumph over chaos. Not because it was easy, not because it was guaranteed, but because someone had to try. And trying, even when you knew the odds were against you, was what separated civilization from the wild. 3 months later, in a small town called Redemption, just over the Colorado border, a telegram would arrive requesting immediate assistance with a mining dispute that had turned violent. The marshal there would be outmatched, outgunned, and looking for someone crazy enough to walk into a war zone with nothing but a badge and a belief that the law mattered. Cole would answer that telegram, just as he'd answered dozens before it, because that's what men like him did. They showed up when called, stood their ground when tested, and refused to surrender their principles no matter the cost. And somewhere in Kansas, in a town called Abilene that was learning to thrive instead of merely survive, the people he'd helped save would remember his name. They'd tell stories about the marshal who'd stopped a war, about the hard choices and harder truths, about the man who'd believed that justice was worth fighting for even when the fight seemed unwinnable. Those stories would grow and change with each telling, becoming legend, becoming myth. But at their core, they'd carry a simple truth, that one man with courage and conviction could change the course of history, could turn enemies into neighbors, could transform a dying cattle town into something with a future. That truth would outlive Cole Maddox, outlive everyone who'd witnessed those brutal summer days when Abilene hung on the edge of destruction. And in outliving them, it would become the foundation of something larger, a belief that the frontier didn't have to remain wild forever, that civilization could take root even in the hardest soil, that peace was possible if people were willing to pay its price. That was Cole's real legacy. Not the arrests or the shootouts, not the dramatic confrontations or the narrow escapes, but the quiet understanding that change, even painful change, was the only path forward. And sometimes, just sometimes, the law could be more powerful than any gun. The prairie stretched endlessly ahead, full of promise and danger in equal measure. Cole touched his heels to the gray's flanks, and together they rode toward the horizon, toward the future, toward whatever came next. Because the West was still being won, one town at a time, one choice at a time, one lawman at a time. And Cole Maddox's work was far from finished.